All right, George, hit it. Live from the 2021 QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo, it's the Ham Radio Workbench and friends here to hang out with you on Friday night. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Ham Radio Workbench. You're up until tonight bi-weekly deep dive into making and technical topics of interest to the radio amateur. If you are a regular listener and joining us, you just heard an episode last Friday, so that's an extra treat. The good news is, hopefully nobody has any lawn care or anything to do next week, because our next live episode will be this recording. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight at the QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo. And a special thank you to Eric for putting this on and also inviting us to present tonight. And of course, this evening, we have a whole host of guests with us. George, why don't you introduce people?
Sure thing. Well, nice to be here with everyone tonight. So we'll go ahead around the table. So let me kick it up over to Canada. Rod, go ahead and take it from here.
Hi, it's Rod, VA3ON, coming to you from Toronto.
Okay, and over to Vince.
Say something deep and meaningful.
Deep and meaningful. I'll try my best. Good evening. It's Vince Dion, VE6LK, and down to Mark.
Oh, you had to get me while I was in the middle of pulling my tea. Hi, Smitty Halibut, Mark here. Formerly KR6ZY, but now N6MTS. My call sign change has finally gone through, but we're only doing introduction, so I'll pass it up to Mike Walker.
And good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Ham Radio QSA Day Fan Fest. And it's Mike, VA3, Mike Whiskey, and I am also in the Toronto area.
Mike, I'm just going to call this out because we're going to deal with technical difficulties. You appear to be joined twice as you and your alter ego, Steve, and we have two audio feeds coming in and they're phasing. We're just stuck with that. Okay, that's fine. We're doing it live. This is live.
Oh, one mic is just not enough. We need to have two mics.
Well, I figured we could use this as an opportunity to teach single sideband.
Can we suppress one of those?
Two mics and one.
Well, good evening.
Stereo.
Good evening, George. George, introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. This is George, KJ6VU. Glad to be here.
And I'm Jeremy, KF7IJZ, the other co-host of the Ham Radio Workbench. If this is your first time with us, welcome. As I said, we are a bi-weekly podcast focused on making and technical topics of interest to amateur radio. And we run the gamut. Everything from radio-specific technical topics to understanding 3D printing, Raspberry Pi, Arduino, building custom kits, the whole nine yards. And tonight, this is kind of going to be a little bit more freeform. We're watching folks roll into the session. Folks that are in the audience, we're going to ask people to put questions into the chat. And if you feel comfortable, we'll bring you on stage to come on up and ask us things you're interested in. If any of you are working on any projects right now, we are very interested in hearing about that. But as we customarily do, speaking of customs, if you want to know more about our show, you can find us online at www.hamradioworkbench.com. And you'll find our entire back catalog of episodes, as well as information about previous projects, etc. As is customary, which I, for some reason, say every single time.
Because it's customary.
Because it's custom. I mean, it's the law. I can't break the law. But what we like to do is start every episode off with talking about the projects that we're working on. And in doing so, we do it like this. I'm going to look over at Vince. Vince, what is
coming up on my workbench is an awesome, simple little audio interface for my FT450 to go with my lovely new Heil Pro 7 headset so that I can continue to run external interfaces into it. I don't just want to have a bunch of cables laying around on the table in front of me because I'm a bit of a neat freak, despite the appearance of my workbench behind me. And so I've got most of the parts I need, something switchcraft, something waiting for parts to come in, etc. Gee, that's what I've got. Am I supposed to toss it over to somebody now, Jeremy, or back to you?
Hang on, Vince. Do you have something you can show us on the camera?
Something I can show you. I have bags of parts I can show you.
That'll be impressive.
This is the exciting part, is that I do have the drawings all mapped out, what I want to do. And I do have the Switchcraft parts, Rapco. See, we've got them.
Nice.
We've got them here live and in living color, ladies and gentlemen. So we're working on it.
So is this all like a box with point-to-point wiring, or is there a board inside? Or
this is all spaghetti wiring at its finest. It is really super simple.
Was that a Hammond aluminum case?
Absolutely, it was.
And
Only the best.
Did you route those holes out yourself with like a Dremel or a drill press or something?
Nothing that fancy, just a hand drill.
Oh, a hand drill.
That was it.
Oh, a powered hand drill, not one
a powered
not
hand drill,
the
of
cranky
course.
doos. Okay.
No, not a cranky do. No, and we do have aluminum or the other aluminum plastic Hammond boxes. 1541s are great. They make awesome project boxes because they've got the little doohickeys on the side, so you can slide a circuit board down in them.
A technical term, doohickey.
Yes, it's a Canadian technical term, to be clear.
Well, yeah, but I speak Canadian.
Hey, yes, you do. So hey, that's what we got going on here. It's simple right now.
All right, and folks, as we go through this, if anybody has a question for Vince or any of our hosts tonight, feel free to pop it in the chat, and we'll try to answer it live. So I don't know, how long do you think it's going to take you to get that done? It looks like a fairly neat, self-contained project.
It is, and this is one of those. By the time I get all the parts together and get out my masking tape and start marking the box and drilling the holes and warming up my soldering iron, if this thing takes me 4 hours, I'm doing it wrong. This probably should be a couple hours work, getting it all done. Get the layout's going to be the hardest part because I'm really super fussy on that. Get out my friend the ruler and my friend, the Staedtler pencil, and do a nice marking and a nice layout on it, and do a good job because I got to look at it every day.
I'm half tempted to challenge you to build that while we're live tonight.
If I had all the parts, I'd be all about it.
Oh, okay. All the parts. Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
Still Switchcraft parts, still waiting on those.
All right. Well, Vince, who do you?
I think I'm going to send it up to Mike.
I knew you were going to do that. So I still will be working on. Remember last week I was working on the UHF amplifier. I'm still working on the UHF amplifier.
Is that the one you snapped off the bit in while you're drilling holes or something?
So I've learned all about. No, I've now learned what I don't know about tapping holes, and I don't know a thing about tapping holes. So, but I do have a picture. We'll stress the technology here. We'll see if this works. So this week I've sort of been playing around with the SWR bridge that goes in it. So we practiced this ahead of time, and it might actually work. So here is one of the SWR bridges that I'm dealing with, and it runs on an Arduino and 4x20 display. And what a great way to breadboard. I had some issues, but at least I can plug and play my way through the addressing. I didn't know how to make a 420 display work, but here is what it looks like without the input. So, no signal input. And the knob to the left is a rotary encoder that doesn't quite work perfectly yet, but I didn't write the code. There's a lot of these solutions on or ideas on the internet. If you Google Arduino SWR bridge and so many great ideas. So I'm getting an education, and it's going to be cool when I decide which display I'm going to use, because I still might go to a 2.8-inch color TFT display, which will look really nice. Then I'll send the front. I'll make up the front panel and send it out to Front Panel Express to be manufactured.
Ooh, that's fancy.
Yeah, and then it'll just look really
fancy
nice.
And spendy.
Yeah. What are you using for the directional coupler?
It came sitting over there. I should have grabbed it. So the kit is the EB104.RU UHF amplifier. So it came with that. You can order it, and so,
so it has its own.
It's a diode detector.
Okay, so it's got its own directional coupler system built into it. Okay, got it.
But as I think George pointed me to last week, that if that doesn't work out, I may just order up the Wave node for UHF for $99 and use that as the input, and it's probably a little more linear. But for me, the watt meter in the device, it's about 8 watts in, 400 out. And remember, I was joking about saying, hopefully I'll get this done before the moon drops out of orbit, because I want to try some UHF. EME digital modes. I think I've got enough antenna to pull it off, but it may work, it may not, but I got to try. So
So question for you, with you said I can't remember, it was 2.1 or 2.4 color screen. Is that one of the Nextion screens?
No, this was I think that it was an ILI 9341 or something like that. But so it uses the multiple wires where it uses the full SPI interface. But I might switch over to it. But I don't know how to code it, so it's not like I can easily convert it. So then I'll go looking for somebody else's solution who's done all the hard work. I'm the integratist. I can't do a lot of the basics, but I like grabbing the bits and making it work as a solution.
Well, I would recommend to see if anybody has, and I mean, if you want easy but a lot of customization, I would recommend you look to see if anybody has adapted the Nextion screens, because they do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. Like, there's a little application you download. You can customize the background. You can draw button areas on and assign them addressable addresses so that you can get to them over. I think actually it supports multiple protocols, but I can't remember. It's been a while since I played with one. But they're nice. I mean, they're pretty. And they're very affordable and well documented.
I ordered one today when we heard about Amazon issues up here. So I've ordered it. So it'll actually get here Monday. So I've got the 2.8 TFT. I've ordered an Nextion one, and I've got the standard 2x16 and 4x20s. And this is the cool part, is I get to breadboard it and see what I like, and then ultimately glue it into the amp itself. I did fix all my taps issues, and so it's been a humbling experience. But still, that's a hobby, right? If you don't try it, you don't learn anything.
So one other friendly suggestion on this design, since you have all those screen options, why don't you put one on every side so you can get your amp intelligence no matter where you are in the room?
Well, you know what happens, and then it's the rolling screen. I don't want the temperature of the heatsink in 3 places, and if the fan's running at what RPM, and I might as well make it Node-RED compatible. By the way, everyone I have will do that because it's got an RS-232 port on it. So, George, you'll love this. It'll accept commands from an external device. So now I can bring it over to Node-RED. And
excellent.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
Awesome. Is that all?
That's about it. So let me send it across. I'll send it across town to Rod, who's on the southwest corner of Toronto.
Not very far at all. And I am looking at the conversations out there. I'll remind everybody that this is going to be a unique opportunity tonight. We're going to be able to hear from you what's on your workbench. And one of the mechanical things we can do within the session is actually promote you up on camera here. Don't be shy. And you can talk about whatever you're working on, which is really, really cool.
And if you want advice or opinions, there's 6 of us, so we can give you at least 30.
At least 12. At least 12 opinions.
If you want to turn a 5-minute job into a 5-hour job, just ask us onto a live stream, and we'll help you. We'll help you around in Eagle or KiCad.
They have standing in this talent.
Excellent. So, hey, what have I been working on? Well, I started ripping some stuff apart today and got myself into a minor panic, realizing I had to be on this tonight because, folks, we're an audio podcast. We don't normally have to deal with all this video stuff and all this chat room stuff. And now I've got some sympathy for all those YouTubers out there that are trying to figure this out along the way. Well, along that line, I spent part of the day trying to figure out how I'm going to route audio in between 3 different radios for instructional purposes and somehow balance all those lines. And I'm going to blame George for a rather complicated audio mixer that runs off of an iPad that he talked me into last year that is causing all sorts of problems for me, and it might be fixing problems eventually. For those of you that can actually see this stuff, get my coordination together.
Put it in front of your nose.
From microphones. Yes.
XLR3.
XLR3, and on the other end of something a little more traditional for a KX.
TRS.
So life is good. That is just one example of a few cables that I'm trying to figure out in the shop right now. And if I was to reverse the camera, which I will not do, boy, oh boy, this looks like a total mess around me, but it's functioning and you're actually seeing me. But what I'm trying to get to is be able to, while I'm doing online training for some kids, we can actually do demos right in the middle of COVID land, where we can show a contact and show the audio from a contact and also see it on the screens and everything like that. So opportunities to switch between all sorts of different video sources. Yeah, good stuff. Not very exciting, but man, it really important so I could talk tonight. I'm going to go over to Marcus.
That's me. Hi, everybody. What's on my workbench? Well, I've got a few different things that I'm working on that I'm not quite ready to talk about. My biggest project right now is one that I'm holding off on talking about until after one of the presentations later this weekend, actually. Look for John Portune, W6NBC's presentation on the double delta slot. He's going to be talking about a new thing that he thought about that will hopefully make them less expensive and maybe easier to build. And I'm kind of working with him on designing a automation tool for his idea of how to make this easier. TLDR, it's kind of a remote switching box, but my intention is to tie it in with the work that George and Mike are doing for their station automation stuff. George already has this serial protocol defined for being able to, all that stuff. With RS-485 power over a Cat5 cable, you can run it super long distances with the actual network protocol on top of it to be able to talk to it and feed it into all of their Node-RED station automation stuff. I'm going to be using that protocol so that this device could be tied into that. But of course, I'll be making a device on the other side that will just talk directly to the remote switching box, so that you don't need to have all of the complexity of the Node-RED and all that stuff. You'll still be able to just have the box that I'm designing on one side, a big long cable, and then a control box on the other side. And so I'm working on this. I don't want to go into too many details as to exactly what it's there for, because again, that I want John to present that. That's his thing. But that's kind of one of the secret squirrel projects I'm working on. Another one is a little bit of a thing, simple Arduino microcontroller and a SI5351, currently into a dummy load, but intention is to eventually add a low-pass filter to that and make a QRSS beacon. Simple low-power QRSS beacon, because that's something I kind of stumbled into recently. And actually, I heard about QRSS on the Eclectic Tech. I think that's the podcast, the ARRL's podcast. Steve Ford started talking about QRSS, and it kind of struck my fancy. So working on building a simple low-power transmitter for that. And while I still have the mic, I am going to cheat and give you all a quick sneak peek for what I will be talking about today. That's an awful lot of WSJT, or excuse me, not today, tomorrow at the QSO Today Expo. This is an awful lot of WSJTX windows, isn't it? There's a total of 8 of them there. Holy cats, how do we have 8 WSJTX windows open all at once?
I don't know, Mark, how do we have 8 WSJTX windows open all at once?
Come talk to me. Come to my presentation tomorrow at 3 p.m. Pacific time, and we'll go into all the details.
You're just a big tease.
I am a tease. That's right. All right. So who hasn't gone yet? Vince, have you done your? Yeah, you did. Rod, have you done your?
Yeah.
Everyone. George, what's on your work?
Do we have about a half hour? So on the last show, I was talking about one of the things on my bench is the station controller. And this is kind of inspired by 2 different things. One is a repeater control system that I designed with my friend of mine, John KJ6K, over several years for the hardware. And then Mike's Node-RED work for remote station operations. So I kind of fused those 2 ideas together. So I'm gonna try to share a screen first, and then I'll show you something live here. So let me see if I can figure out how to share. Let's do screen share, and we'll pick this one here. So Let's see.
Ooh.
Choose the application or tab.
You're there.
You're up.
Okay, let's not do that.
You killed it.
So,
It
all
was
right.
working.
Was it really?
Yeah, we saw the chassis. Yeah.
Oh, because I
bring it
couldn't
back.
see it on my side. All right, let's bring that back again. Okay.
It highlights it.
We were seeing your PowerPoint.
Oh, okay, great. So this is a picture of the repeater control system that we designed. So usually repeater controllers are like a little circuit board, and they do CWID and maybe a DTMF decoder to turn something on and off, and that's too simple. So my friend John and I decided to build a repeater controller for our club. It's called the Cactus Intertie. So it's like the world's biggest RF link network. And to make the network work, you need to build control systems that have a lot of ports. So this is a picture of what that controller looks like. It's a 3U card cage. It's a subrack, a vector subrack. And then we designed the backplane that bolts onto the back. And you could plug boards into that backplane. And each one of these boards goes to a radio. It goes to a repeater or a link radio or a remote base radio or whatever. So anyway, we've made now just recently the third generation of that control system mostly for our own club, but some other clubs bought them. And then as I was kind of done with that project, I was thinking I would like to use the same idea for a station controller, because I really love this modular approach. So I decided to go ahead and do that. And this is what the card cage looks like live and in person. So it's a 19-inch, standard. Whoop, there we go. Computer controller out of it, but to make a set of boards that will give you the various kind of switching and sensors that you want for your remote station. And as I add new features, I just slap another board into the backplane and extend the functionality, as opposed to having one box that does audio mixing and another box that turns the router on and off and another box that switches antennas and all that. Try to get as much of that stuff into this one chassis. So I started designing a series of boards that will go in there. This is the prototype of a 6 relay board. So you can see the backplane connector. There's only about a half a dozen pins that are used. It's power and ground. And then I'm using RS-45 like Mark was talking about to communicate.
Question. Yeah. So it looks like you're using 0.1 pitch, just pins, and not actually using like a card edge.
Yeah, so in the repeater controllers for reliability, we use 64-pin DIN connectors, and so they're high reliability connectors with a shroud and card guides and the whole bit. But mechanically, it's identical as cheap little 90-degree headers and sockets. And it turns out, by the way, it's really not cheaper to do it this way. If you buy the headers, especially the female sockets, you might as well buy the DIN connector, but I happen to have these sitting around the lab, so I just used this for the prototype. So, but if you look inside the real deal backplane, you can see they're really nice DIN connectors.
So real quickly, George, there was a question from Harry Jones, K9DXA. Did you print the card cage?
No, good question.
Do you have a I forget what the technology is, but one of the metal printers?
Yeah, but I don't use it for this.
I have a question.
Yeah. Well, actually, let me
start.
I want to answer another question. So the answer is no. This is an extruded aluminum card cage. It's made by Vector, and you can just buy them at DigiKey. And it's a 3U, what they call a subrack, because they're intended. You can either bolt it into a network rack or comm cabinet, or you can put it into a box that has the rails built into it. Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Mike.
So you came up with this idea, 2 weeks ago, and you already have
never sleeps ever.
I designed 5 boards, and they already showed up from JLC PCB. Now, in all fairness, they're not complicated. I mean, they're really not. And half of the boards are identical. So it's not, in other words, the back end, like the bus connector and the microcontroller, that's all the same stuff in every board. The only thing that's different is the business end. So like this is a 6 relay board. You can see 3 of them mounted here. And then there's pluggable terminal blocks that plug in. So when this goes in the card cage, the connectors snap in or unplug from the front. So the only thing that's special about the relay board is the fact that there's a relay driver chip and some relays on the front. One of the other boards here is, this one is a DC voltmeter board, and all the back stuff is the same. The front is 8 2-pin pluggable connectors for 4 single-ended DC voltmeters and 4 differential DC voltmeters. There's another one here. Speaking of wave node, where is it? Here we go. This one, not that you could really, I could show you the same board. You couldn't tell. This board here has space for 3 6-pin DIN connectors plus some terminal blocks. That's for wave node RF couplers. So each RF coupler has 2 voltages, a forward and reverse voltage. And so you can plug in 4 watt meters into that board. So let's say you're at a repeater site, you've got 6 transmitters. You just plug in 2 of these boards, and now you got 6. So by the way, back to the quick question about did I 3D print it? Obviously, I didn't 3D print the aluminum box. But if you wanted to, let's say if you're going to make a controller and you only want like 5 things, you could 3D print essentially a set of card guides. And on Thingiverse, I found somebody already made it, of course. So you could actually build your own little plastic cage yourself. You don't need to actually go buy an aluminum chassis.
So I want to address a comment from Grant Porter, KG4SDR. So Grant, your comment about careful, Jeremy will think it's a Eurorack case. So when we started this and George held it up, I asked him, I said, do you know how many HP that cage is? Because George didn't realize that there actually is, that horizontal pitch is an actual standard. I think it's 5.4 millimeters is 1 HP. And it's the rails that he has are vector rails, the same rails we use in Euroracks. And so thank you, Grant. If we had a t-shirt cannon, I would fire one your way.
And here I thought he meant hit points. I didn't know he was talking about horizontal spacing. Go ahead, Rod.
I knew about horizontal spacing, but I didn't realize that's what he was asking about.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, so one of the things that, clearly you've done a lot of thinking about this. You've got 5 boards designed already, which I have a serious problem with that productivity level, but let's stick to business. Hey, what's going to become of this thing? Like, clearly you've got some kind of grand unification theory going on here. What's the purpose behind this chassis? What's going to happen to it all? And can our dear listeners get in on it?
Well, thanks for the straight line question, Rod. It's a good question. Like all the projects that I work on, I personally have something that I want to build because I want to solve a problem or play with some technical thing. And so I really build it for myself, for my own interest and education. But I think a lot of the stuff I wind up building, other people would find useful and interesting. So as with a lot of projects, the first thing is to build the prototype and try it out and to get it to the version that I'm really comfortable with so that I would actually be proud of showing it to somebody else. Because the first version is like, don't look too closely.
You don't do it in one board spin? Come on. My whole image is shattered here.
Yeah.
You used Eagle, right?
I did. I used Eagle.
Oh, of course
Eagle
we
worked
did.
great.
They are the first sponsor of our show.
I know. I'm just...
No, good.
I used Eagle and it's great. And it actually, you could do this size, I think, with the free version.
I'm going to have to try.
So George, can you interface that with your Flex Radio?
Absolutely. You can interface anything. The funny, what's really funny is you can
with your 8
because I found out Mike's been trying to educate me. It's a difficult process for him, I know, but I'm not the fastest learner on some of this stuff. So there's a USB jack. There's a USB jack in the back of the radio, and you can control the radio through that USB jack, and so you could easily adapt this to interface to the radio.
Be careful there. Not quite true.
Well,
there's
you can get to some
USB
stuff there.
Jack. So you can drive like a relay board right out of the back of and there's cat data coming out. You can get like
bandit and other stuff out of there, can't you?
Yes. So there's a lot of stuff you can do in it.
Does the radio act as a USB host?
No. On the back of the there's a couple of things here. On the back of the radio, we have the ability to plug in RS-232 USB devices or parallel bitmapped USB devices, so we can emulate Yaesu's BCD format, or we can emulate Kenwood CAT data streaming out. But it will only tell you band data. I can't remember if it tells you if it will do transmit data or not. I don't think so, et cetera. And so that's really handy if you're building a station and you want, or you can drive this. This is an 8 relay card, and I just plug it literally in the back of the radio, and then they're going to the radio and say, hey, every time I go to 80 meters, turn on 0. When I go to 40, turn on 1, or turn on 1 and 2. And then, but the other part is, to do more, we have to come in through the LAN connector.
Yes.
And that's where
so what I want to do is use the Raspberry Pi to go to the REST API or whatever to talk to.
Yes.
That's the way. So by the way, speaking of doing exactly that, I didn't mention in here that the host processor board is a Raspberry Pi. So the Raspberry Pi sits on the on one of these boards, slips in the backplane, and then talks to all the other boards on the back across the backplane. So that's how I talk to the Flex, which is definitely something I'd like to get to. So Mike's going to pound Node-RED into my head, and once I get the Node-RED stuff working on there.
So I have another question for you that actually came up in my world this week as people were talking about interfacing control voltage and audio signals across great distances with cables. So you have 64 pins on the back. When you're passing a signal, are you using discrete grounds? So you're using a signal ground pair or power ground pair, or do you just have a couple pins dedicated to ground for the whole thing?
The backplane has 6 pins that are dedicated to ground, but it's all the same. It's a DC ground. There's no isolated grounds. All the audio. So in the repeater controller, we run audio on the backplane. So essentially each board has a 9-to-1 mixer on it, and the output of that mixer goes to the transmitter output. So the receive audio comes into the board, gets processed, goes to the backplane on one channel. So there's 8 receiver channels in a telemetry bus channel. So all the audio is on the backplane, and when you plug in a card, then the mixer can select which of those 9 audio channels they want to sum together into the output. So all of that is ground referenced, and it works okay because since there's op amps driving the signals on the backplane, they're very low impedance. And so you really don't have any noisy, buzzy issues. But we do, on the backplane, we do put a ground around the audio traces. And we do a ground fill on the backplane, but at one end of the backplane, we don't connect the like on an old disk drive cable, you have like 32 wires, but half of them are ground and half of them are data, right? They're kind of next to each other and they kind of shield the signal. Well, imagine that in the backplane, but you only connect the ground on one end. You leave it open on the other end. That way you don't create ground loops through the traces. Anyway.
Got you. What's a disk drive? I'm kidding. I'm not that young.
Precursor to the solid state.
Is that like a zip disk or a jazz drive?
It's like a flick drive.
All right, bringing us back onto track.
I do want before we change. I'm sorry. Let me interrupt your interruption. I do want to go back to Rod's softball question about what are we going to do with these things. So I feel like compelled to answer that question. So first thing is I want to get it to the point where I'm happy with it, which is probably in the next couple of months, I would say. But at that point, then the question really is, does anybody care? So if anybody besides me really wants to build something like this, then I'll probably make circuit boards available and people could build their own thing. So it's just like, by the way, I'm thrilled, Mark, that when you're asking me about the control protocol and the wiring for your project, that was a big hurrah for me because I was just thrilled that you would want to adopt the same signaling scheme. So that would be fully compatible with this system.
I'm going to need some signaling scheme. I might as well use one that's already been defined. But I wanted to go back to something you said earlier. Like if you wanted it, but you didn't necessarily need a cage, you only just wanted a couple of cards. Mm-hmm. Thinking about it, the way you've got your 2x32 backplane, the headers, you could just do vertical headers on there and stack those boards.
Yeah, actually, there's
like without bothering with the backplane.
Yeah, there's a couple ways you could do that. So when we did the repeater controller, we did like the full, huge multi-port, add extra port kind of high-end thing. But a lot of times, probably 3/4 of the time, people don't need that. What they really want is like 2 or 3 ports. And so when we design the backplane, it's passive. So of the 64 pins, pin 1 on one connector is hooked to pin 1 on every connector. And there's no active electronics in there, which means if you want to make you can make a backplane of any number of slots that you want. It really doesn't matter. And the way we built the electrical interfaces, it's very immune to that kind of a system. There's no termination in the backplane or anything. So you can literally make a board whatever size you want. You could even hand wire. Now on the repeater controller, you use about half to 2/3 of the signals that are on the backplane. For this application, you only need power ground and 2 pins for data. So frankly, if you're going to design this from scratch, I wouldn't have used a 64-pin connector. I would have used like a 20-pin connector and doubled up a bunch of the pins for reliability. So that's like on this one here, this is the Raspberry Pi. For testing purposes, I only put a couple of headers on the backplane because I really only need a few of those signals. So if you stack the boards vertically, you could actually just drop wires through them. Now you can't take it apart again, but you could just drop wires and solder it. So if you notice in the corners, there's holes in the 4 corners, and that's specifically so you can put hex standoffs between the boards and snap a little backplane.
That's a good idea.
And in fact, when we produce these big backplanes, these 20-slot backplanes, we also make a 5-slot backplane, which it's identical. It's just 5 slots. So you can just make a little baby controller out of this stuff and just slap a baby backplane, and you've got this little cube of boards. So
I noticed Anderson power pole hanging off the back of your chassis. Is that where power comes in? Do you have a power supply board if you wanted to have a completely passive backplane?
Yeah. So the only slot that is that's really special is the first slot. Well, there's a few actually, but anyway, the first slot is the power supply slot. The 12-volt DC comes in here, and there is the very first board that it runs into is a power supply board.
Okay.
The power supply board is a power supply. It basically takes the 13.8 volts that comes in and goes through the power switch. You can see the big fat traces on the board. Yep. So what happens is the 12 volts comes in, goes through the switch and a fuse or a resettable electrical fuse, and then it puts 12 volts on one set of bus pins. Then there's a 8-volt. Well, there's a variable voltage regulator, switching regulator, and you normally set it for like 7 or 8 volts, and you run that on another bus in the backplane. So every one of these boards here gets ground 8 volts and 13.8 volts. And then you could decide for the board which one of those power sources you want to use. And most of these boards, I put a local power supply on it. So I'll take the 8-volt bus and step it down to 5 volts. And the reason I do that is that you could put a switching regulator on the board for $4 or $5, or you can put a 7805 on the board for like 75 cents. And you don't want to put 14 volts in the 7805. It'll just bake it alive. So the first switcher brings it down to 7 or 8 volts, and then the local linear regulator drops it down to 5 volts, and everybody's happy. So then you can pick whatever power you want at the board level.
It's also good for noise elimination, because now you only have to deal with the noise domain of the local board. You don't have to worry about noise coming in over your power.
Exactly. And if you're doing an audio circuit, you might even have an audio regulator and a logic regulator on that particular board. By the way, another application that I haven't done yet, surprisingly, Mike.
But wait, there's more.
Oh yeah. So I want to do my in-shack audio mixing redesign that Mark, you and I were talking about, and I'm thinking about doing a 4-channel mixer on one of these boards. Since I have 64 pins in the backplane, after you get through power and ground and data, you've got like almost all of them left over. You've got like 48 pins left over, and they're all bussed together. So you can use them for whatever you want in your own application. So I was going to take, let's say, a 4-to-1 mixer, and you can jumper select it to go to one of the bus pins in the backplane. You can have a second, third, fourth, fifth card at 4 channels per that all mix down to one of those channels in the backplane. Then you have a master mixer that takes those groups and mixes those down. So you can have, a very large expandable mixer, and all the control for everything is still done on the same bus. And the bus is not a clocked bus. In this case, the repeater controller uses I2C and some other high-speed digital buses, but this thing uses RS-485. So there's no clock, so there's no noise on the backplane at all.
So George,
this audio mixer, George, does this mean I really didn't need that great big audio mixer?
No. Of course you need it because it's got nice blinky lights and it's.
Okay. It's the LEDs that make the difference.
Yeah, you need it's worth the money for the LEDs.
Thanks, man.
So George, to take the spotlight off you for just a moment, we have let's see, Steven Zellers, W4IIR asked, Mike Walker, can you please show us the progress of the amp?
Yes, give me a second. I'll go get the PA.
This makes for great audio podcast content.
No kidding.
I would say George continue, but I think Mike's going to be back in less than 15 minutes. So,
well, what's great about the show that it's set up tonight is that everybody's on the video feeds. You get to see all the sausage making in the background, because we often on the audio podcast have the video up and there's various heckling and whatever going on visually. So hopefully that doesn't come through on the audio side, but you get to see that tonight.
Well, somebody did comment that they really like to see the sausage being made, so it's working. Take it away, Mike.
So there's the PA, and it's on this heatsink. Okay, so I'm going to show this.
Show the broken top.
Actually, this is quite interesting. I had a stereo die, and I was throwing it out. It was a big. I was an outlaw, for the AV system. So I'm taking it apart and going, "Oh, look at all this stuff!" And I scavenged a bunch of stuff, and I scavenged a heatsink, but it wasn't wide enough. So I actually took it and chopped it with a chop saw, and I glued it together. Now, what are you saying? I glued it together with was JB Weld steel. And I went the other day to see, can I break this seam? And I put it in a vise and I started tapping on it. And then I started, digging at it and I couldn't break it. And I thought, okay, just for yucks, I'm going to heat it up. And I had it in the vise and I took a blowtorch. I kid you not. I took a big blowtorch and in the vise and I heated this all up. And then I started banging on the top part with a hammer. I could not break this. I was super impressed. I thought the glue would fail at, with, I don't know how many hundreds of degrees. Anyway, so nice. It wasn't perfectly smooth. So I was filing it so that the 80-pound copper, this is not light. This is a 3/8 copper. This is where the tapping nightmare is. This is where you end up with a hole that you patch because you had to dig out the drill. See, now, George, now you can see where you had to dig out the broken tap.
Oh, wow.
So, it's a fun experiment. With the kit is the low-pass filter. Everything needs a low-pass filter.
How broad is the filter? Did you have to tune it?
I haven't swept it yet, but I will, since we have toys to do that. And this is the SWR bridge that comes with it. And I wish my camera was like yours in autofocus. There it goes. And so I've wired it up to test it, and I'll run some RF through it eventually, and then see how many volts I get from the diode detector so I can start to calibrate the watt meter on the other end. So I'm just deciding which one of my UHF radios is the signal generator on this. So that's it.
So
you mean the sacrificial lamb?
Yeah, you may want to look at the AD 83 something 17. Yeah,
8307.
The one I'm thinking of, I think, is 8327. But anyway, you're thinking of the right chip. The logarithmic op amp, I think, is what they call it. But basically, it's a power meter. So if you wanted to get something a little bit more linear or logarithmic, I guess, a little bit more precise than the voltage detector.
There's a question in the chat that says, is that the Russian amp kit? And what I would suggest is if you could drop a link to that in the chat, which I actually don't know if you can. Yeah, I think you can drop links.
I can. Yep. Yeah, I'll look it up right now.
Sorry, George, go ahead.
Question right above that, too. Did Mike say that this was a series of kit modules for his amp?
Yeah, when I pop the link in it, you can go to the site and you'll figure out what he's got. So It's not I've never built an amp before, so I still don't know. I know I have to do the bias. I don't really know what I have to do yet, but I have friends, so. But yeah, checks in the mail. Cool. Oh no, that's from Vince.
So what's
George,
the power? I'm sorry, Jeremy. I'm just curious. What's the power on that amp? The output power?
About 6 or 7 watts drive to 400 out.
And that's a single device?
And you're going to ask me what it is, aren't you?
Well, I assume it's some LD MOS.
It is. I'll put it in the chat because I forgot. So it's
you can make up a number. I wouldn't know the difference, but I assume that's what it is.
Yeah.
I don't think that's legal in the U.S. That's more than 15 dB in a single stage.
As a kit, you can do that.
Oh, really?
And my call begins with VA3.
Yeah, that's why I said in the U.S. I was clear about that. Okay.
And it needs about 50 volts at 15 amp power supply. So I have a 2 meter, 2 kilowatt amp sitting over there for another project I haven't, I bought that one. I had to buy a power supply for it. So I was going to buy a second power supply, and I thought I'll just switch it back and forth as I need it. I don't need 2 power supplies.
So that's for when you need to brute force the repeater, I take it.
You've been here, haven't you? In Toronto.
That's one way to capture mic on the repeater.
That's a FM capture
the
effect.
lights
No
dim.
problem.
You start. I know it's the different frequency, but you start interacting with the radar stuff up at the board. Actually, that's an interesting question. Isn't there a line towards the Canada border where you can't do 440 stuff?
220.
Yeah,
there's a 220 RF boundary at certain frequencies.
Basically, if it's a frequency that we both share, I think the rules are different than if it's a frequency that you can only do in the U.S.
Well, I thought it had something to do with radar. Somebody said
there was the whole UPS was going to go to 220.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, UPS wound up with some of the 220 spectrum and then ended up not using it. But yeah, I'm talking about the red line, which sounds like a holdover from the Cold War.
Tim brings up a point, Tim. I haven't decided, and that makes perfect sense to have the fins up and the heatsink down. When the way it goes together, I might just do that. I've certainly been considering that.
Or just put a fan on the bottom of it and blow air across it. Either one of those would be effective. If you have the fins pointing up, it'll be much better at passive air cooling. But if you've got any sort of forced air over it, it won't matter.
Well, I have a question for you. If you're going to do convection cooling and you put the fins up, how much of a difference does it make if the plate is horizontal and the fins are vertical, as opposed to the plate is vertical and the fins are vertical and you have vertical airflow? I'm sure Vince knows the answer to that.
I'm more of a Tim Allen guy. I'm going to take the 12-volt fan and run it at 24 volts.
More power.
More power. He worked for his dishwasher. Remember? He ran it at 220, 240.
Hey, I actually, on an unrelated note, they have a show again, him and Richard Karn, on, I think it's on the History Channel, that's also co-hosted by April Wilkerson, who is a famous YouTube woodworking gal. And I think that's what it is. It's like a maker competition, but more the woodworking and construction side of things. So real quickly, lots of folks in the chat have commented about this red line, and a lot of people are chiming in with, well, I can't do 440 where I live, and I'm nowhere near the red line. What this reminds me of when I lived in DC and we would drive back west to get home. In West Virginia, there's the National Radio Quiet Zone. It's like a huge area where you're not supposed, but I forget what the interstate was. But that interstate runs right through it, and none of us turn our cell phones off when you drive through it. And you are in the boundary of that area.
But it does have signage, because I went through there a couple of years back, and it does have signage that you're not supposed to run your cell phones at it.
Do you remember what interstate that is?
It's 80... north-south. It was on my way to Florida, driving down to Florida, and I can't remember. But yeah, interesting point. And of course, my truck's got all sorts of antennas on it. You stop for coffee or gas, they look at you funny.
I don't think that has anything to do with being near the National Radio Frequency Quiet Zone.
Yeah, it could be the decorations on my truck or the Canadian license plates, one of the two. But yeah, we don't want to confuse the red lines with the do lines with the, that's
the A line, the B line.
So, George, that was the first project.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah.
So what did you do every day between the hours of, say, 0200 and 0400?
I was mining my own bauxite to extrude my own aluminum to make my own card cage.
It's an artisanal free range.
It's hard. No MSG, GMO-proof, organic aluminum rack.
Oh, no. This is the stuff we usually don't broadcast.
Yeah, this is what's called what's left over on the floor.
You get the bloopers live.
Exactly.
So,
I just saw a thumb up kind of like scroll up the screen.
That's
Is there a way for people to like what we're doing? Oh, no. Here we go.
There it goes.
So
There's more of it.
I-68, that sounds about right. And 81, people have
People have found it.
No.
Oh, here we
There's a
go.
bite mark.
Oh, I feel the love. And thankfully, apparently, there are no explicit emojis available.
I was just going to ask that. Does it go the other way?
Now, if you look now, Mark is tearing up. He's about to do an acceptance speech. They like me. They really like me.
Oh my gosh.
So George, seriously, what else do you have on the workbench?
Keep it short.
Hang on, I'll show you.
Oh, while he's gone, we could mute him.
Do 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 do.
Oh no, here we go back to the.
Oh.
Oh, this is what people didn't get last week.
Yep.
They got to see the shelf.
This is the thing that people couldn't see because I chroma keyed accidentally the green out of the box.
No, it was perfect because it was like a flex waterfall.
Yeah, it was the Flex waterfall. Yeah, talk about a shameless plug. So this is as befits this event with 3 Canadians. This is my Nanook made in Canada 905 case for my portable little HFQRP setup.
Well, that's Rod's area code. 905. That's Rod's area code.
There you go.
Okay, this was not set up to be shown here, so I have to kind of do this balance on one hand. So this is the 705 portable station. Note how the radio cannot fall out of the case. Watch it fall out of the case. See, it won't fall out of the case.
Your fingers. Oh, that you're not holding the radio.
No, I'm holding a piece of balsa or birch
Which
wood
will fall out of the case.
that's holding the accessories. So the ubiquitous Right in the Rain logbook for when your phone loses batteries. End-fed random wire antenna.
Made by whom, George?
Pactenna.
Available at
we can't find those. No, they're not available at Backtenna.com.
Well, that's dipoles are, but the other ones are not. But stay tuned because in a couple of weeks they will be. Guys.
Not
Yes.
girls.
You don't have any gals in that
VHF
box?
antenna. More guys and miscellaneous hardware. My favorite field coax, RG316, which is like RG174, but it's Teflon and it's more, it's better in the heat. RG174 on a sunny day gets very sticky and it's just awful. This stuff is PTFE, so it's good for a lot more temperature, a lot more degrees than you want to be in. Roll up J-pole, because just in case for VHF. Palm paddle, which is unfortunately no longer being manufactured, which is a real bummer, because these guys make really nice portable little magnetic mount paddles. The popular Squirt ES4 multi-tool that we showed off in the last episode. And I can't do this in one hand. This has the VS3 Bluetooth mic and earbuds. And that pretty much, and a 3 amp hour, I have to pull this out, 3 amp hour Bio-NO battery, which will run this radio for more time than you want to be out in the field. And, and a pencil. So there you go. That's the box. So all those little accessories sit in the bottom of the box, and the radio is mounted. What's that?
It's not a blizzard. You don't have to turn it upside down.
No, but I showed the fact that it's mounted in here.
And is that a camera stud mount holding it in place at the bottom?
Exactly. It's a quarter 20 camera stud screw.
Brilliant.
And if you unscrew it and pull that little guy out, And now if I turn it upside down, it will fall out of the case. So I'm not going to do that. But it's pretty snug in here because I got these little arms that poke up that are very, very nicely made. And there's a frame that goes around the radio, and those are all bolted together. Now, at this point, I can lift the radio up and take it out. Now, I like doing this because all the wiring is tucked in underneath the radio. And if I'm going to sit down, I can also just tip the radio up like this. It's hard to do it when you're looking at it backwards.
You have a question on the sidearms. Why do you still have sidearms?
That's a good question.
I said they were cool.
Well,
Yeah,
specifically,
so-
why do you have sidearms if it's in a case?
Yeah, right.
Right.
Well,
What's
I didn't know
the
it was going to be in a case when I bought the sidearms, to be perfectly honest. So I was kind of going back and forth, and I saw the little brackets. I thought, oh, those are really cool. I'm going to get those. So I got them, and then once I got them, I was trying to figure out what case, and then I decided to use this thing. Now, it turns out that if you put those side arms on the radio, so the thickness of the bracket that goes around the rim of the radio, plus the little arms, makes the radio just the perfect width to snugly fit inside the case. So it kind of shims the radio in position. So it turns out completely by accident that it's the right size. So that's why I did it. So the bottom of the radio sits on that little piece of plywood. The top of the radio, you don't really need to put anything on the top of it, but I put a little piece of closed cell foam up at the top. So when I stick it down in there, it snugly fits down in there and won't rattle around, whether or not you bolt it in place or not. So if I forget to bolt it in place, it's not going to fall out. Plus, when you close the lid, it's a really tight closure. Oh, under the radio also is the MAT 705 tuner. So it's just barely enough space to fit it all in there. So from the bottom of the case, there's the MAT tuner, there's a piece of 3mm birch, then there's the radio, and then by the time you get to the top where the handles are, they squish up into the egg crate foam, and there's no more room. It's exactly the right size, and you couldn't slip anything in. You couldn't slip a piece of paper in there. I mean, it's about as snug as it gets.
George, people asked, what is the case?
It is a Nanook 905, Nanuk.
Available in numerous colors, because as I mentioned on the episode where we talked about this, I wound up with the same case that was available at my local ham radio store, R&L Electronics. It was on the used table, which it was brand new, and I got it for $15.
Yeah, brand new on Amazon. These are like $45, so they're really not bad. They're very popular. I mean, there's a lot of these cases. Of course, Pelican is like the big king of portable cases, so everybody knows Pelican cases. And I would say, if I were going for the ultimate in protection, I'd probably go with a Pelican case, because I don't know what they call it, but the resin plastic material that they make them out of it's not brittle. It doesn't give. It's really, really strong. I mean, I don't know anything that's better than that stuff.
I think it's a fiberglass reinforced something or other.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know anybody else that does the same. However, besides being 2 to 3 times the price, they're also a little bit chunkier for a given size. And frankly, I think these Nanooks are a great value. I mean, if you put it on the ground and you drove over it with your truck, I don't know if I wouldn't put my fancy camera or radio in there and give it a try, but I think it's pretty. Rod just put the picture up of the green screen dropout, the Flex Spectrum display. That's hilarious. Yep. Anyway, and they make a whole range of different size of cases. I think they're pretty nice. And Amazon stocks them. You can get them in a couple days. And we don't have an affiliate link for you to click on.
Well, so the bad news is you don't necessarily want to put them under your tires and try driving over them. But the good news is they're so bright, you wouldn't miss them if you did put them under your tires.
That's the reason I picked this color. Obviously, I kind of like this kind of alien green color, but I picked it so you can't just leave it at the park by mistake. So you'll know if you've got it or not.
Never done that.
Don't ask. So anyway, that's everything in the box. Oh, and I forgot to show you one last little thing is I put on the side, I don't really care about it being watertight, frankly, because I don't plan on taking it anywhere where it's going to go into water. So I put a dual power pole DC port here that just plugs right into the battery. So you can just plug your charger into here. So I have a shelf.
Where'd you get those?
This is PowerWorks.
PowerWorks, okay.
Yeah, that's their standard.
Quicksilver Radio sells them.
I'm reading the comments. Ham Radio Workbench. The podcast may be free, but it will cost you hundreds.
Yep.
Very nice,
Just going to
John.
comment
Very
on
nice.
that. Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
You'd be lucky if it cost you hundreds.
Yeah, I just ordered a Nook 905 from Amazon before they close up here.
Yeah, you should get it before everybody else does. So then for the antenna connector, I put a flange mount BNC. I only used flanged connectors because I don't want them to twist. It's really easy to find the bulkhead round ones, but no matter how much you cinch down the nut to hold it in place, it's no good. So I use the flange one and put a couple screws in there to hold it in place. Then on the other side, there's two jacks over here. There's a TRS jack, which goes to the paddle input. So I don't like, if the thing is open, even I would never operate this with the lid closed. Why would you do that? But I just don't want wires kind of hanging in and out of the top. And then this connector with this little dust cap is a USB connector. So that just goes straight to the USB jack on the radio. So the paddle USB, essentially, all of the external connections come to the outside of the case, with the exception of the microphone. So the reason I didn't bother with a microphone jack is that once I started playing with the Bluetooth speaker mic, that thing is so good. It sounds really good, and it just works. And it's very tiny, and there's no coiled cord or anything. So this is not the lightest setup. So this is a little bit like over the top, but I didn't want even the coiled cord. And then like the radio's on the ground, and I'm, you have to be 2 feet from the radio. With the Bluetooth microphone, you can be 10 feet away from you can be 30 feet away from the radio, and it works fine. So it's just so convenient for portable that I didn't bother with the speaker mic jack on the side. But you could do that.
It's handy if you're visiting a tree.
Yeah, actually.
Middle of a QSO.
So anyway, that's the whole get up. And so it's fun. This is one of those projects where all the planning in the world, you would not end up with, I would never end up with what I end up with. I always start out with an idea. I get a bunch of stuff. I start to build it. And halfway through, I somehow take a big left turn, and it turns out differently. Because you don't know till you fit all the stuff together and see what really works. And, some people like this kind of an approach. Other people, like you see all these front firing gator case kind of affairs, which I think look beautiful, but I never take them anywhere. I think Jeremy and I had the same experience of building out one of those, Go Box things, and they look gorgeous on your bench. And I would never take it anywhere because it's just too big and heavy. And then I did a lightweight version where I said, okay, I'm going to split it up into 3U ones and put a radio in this one and accessories in that one and all this stuff. And I didn't use that either. So I figured this is portable enough.
I will say that the 7300 setup you had in the 3U Gator case, considering that radio for me is largely, it gets used at winter field day and field day.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of actually, and I carry it in, there's a conversation in the chat about the Harbor Freight plastic cases. Back when MCM Electronics was with us, I bought a ton of their cheap plastic cases on clearance, and I have one of the rolling like suitcase ones, and that's actually what I store that radio in, with its tuner, all the cables and accessories, and it's just grab and go. And for something like that, I would have used that 3U with the custom panel mount. Who was the company that made those?
They're down in Los Angeles. I'll have to look it up. It's something com. They're all over eBay too. They make custom plates for 2A mobile radios and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so for something like that, or if you actually had a rack in your shack, then that would be good. But you're right. The Go Box thing was fun to build, but ultimately was not very practical.
So when I did the 3U for the radio, you can get the radio in the case and maybe one other thing like a speaker. But that's it. And for the full station, I wanted the antenna tuner. I never put the batteries or power supply in the box. That's always separate anyway. But I wound up with an antenna tuner and some other accessories in the second box. And when you go to set up, then you got to connect the boxes together. And The surprising problem with that setup is to do it all properly. I wound up with about 3-4 pigtails to go from the radio to the back panel, then the back panel to the other case, then from that back panel into the tuner, then from the output of the tuner back to the back panel. So from the radio to the actual coax, there were 4 pigtails, and that's 8 connectors and 3 bulkhead connectors. So that's a lot of points of failure. And you think, well, you get all new stuff and screwed all together. What's the big deal? I actually had failures. I bought some pre-made 18-inch pigtails, and 2 of them were bad. And I bought them from a big reputable, ham radio retailer, and they were bad. And
eBay?
So no, it was, I won't name them because I buy a lot of stuff from them and they're nice people. So, they just happen to have some bad stuff. So, in retrospect, and I looked at this and I thought like, well, this should all work perfectly fine. And why is it so fragile? And, was it my construction technique?Maybe. But I think it's just, there's too many points of failure. And I think, probably Vince, this better than I do about like, if you were going to, okay, here's a question for you, Vince. If you were going to the field, like, what do you think about in terms of how do you make your stuff more reliable?
I think about making sure it's going to get there in one piece. I'm thinking about pre-checking it before it leaves home. I'm thinking about checking it before I put it away in its special holding cell here in Shea V6LK. I think about all of those things. But mostly I want it protected because I do not know what the gorilla is going to be like when they handle my luggage. And by the way, I'm the gorilla. Am I going to hit a bad bump in the road as I'm driving down the road? All of those things come to mind. Now, at the $250 workbench, let's change gears for just a minute. We were talking about purpose and what's the purpose for stuff. And so I built a toolkit that was primarily aimed at repair. You built a toolkit, George, that was primarily aimed at building and prototyping. And so Go kits are a really interesting topic for that reason, because we've got guys that OH8STN, he loves to go out on his bicycle and set up with his 705 or his Lab 500 and show people some stuff. You like going out hiking. My idea of portable operations is bring a table and a chair that I can set up, because I'm typically doing public service events. So my Go kit is actually 2 big Pelican cases. Now they sit and they tie together very nice and neatly. There's a full HF setup in it. There's a sound card interface. There's a drop-in charger for my handy talkie that I always take to events, et cetera, et cetera. So these things are all built for purpose. I'm watching the comments in the chat, and people are talking about gator cases with wheels. That might work for some people. It doesn't work for me. I can't lift it. Bad back guy. That's my life. So I tend to put stuff in small cases that I can tie together as a system. Anyway, bunch of different random thoughts there.
So your modular system idea, that was sort of the path I was going down with the 3U cases.
Yeah.
So one thing that I noticed, by the way, I've looked at a ton of these projects online, and one thing that I notice a lot is you'll see like a 19-inch rack that's maybe 6U high, says this big thing, and wait aside for the moment, in the middle of this is the radio. And half the time it's like an 857, or so if you just look at it like ergonomically, like look at the front of it. Okay, the box is 21 inches wide, and it's about 18 inches tall, and the heart of the whole system is about that big. And it just there's something wrong about. I mean, aesthetically, it's like no. The other 95% of the space is taken up by the support infrastructure for that. This is wrong. So. Anyway, that's always objectionable to me.
Yeah, it is indeed. It's a fun topic though. You ask 5 people what's a Go kit, and you get 5 completely different answers all the time. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I'm big and out of shape, and most of my portable operating is done from the car. So my Go kit is my car, right? Like I've hardwired things into my car. And I've got the displays up on the front dashboard. I've got all the hand mics and speakers and everything up in the front of the car. It's in a Prius, and so it's a rolling ball of QRM. I will never be able to operate while driving just because I can't hear anything on HF. But I can pull up in a park or at a hilltop or something and pull over, park, roll down the windows, and then turn on the radio and operate that way. That's you're talking about built to purpose. That's my use case. And it works great for me. It means that I don't have to lug things because I generally operate from the car.
And I think there's two aspects to this, right? There's how are you actually using it on the picnic table or wherever you are. But there's also how are you storing this so you can find it next week. And, with these smaller cases, I find it's a lot easier to just label the edge of it, be able to find it, all the stuff that I need for that particular operation. It's all there. But I have noticed actually that George goes a little farther with this.
If he just pans the camera this way.
Well, yeah, he's got his whole shop. I'm sorry, I'm throwing you out there, George, but
thanks, buddy.
He's got it in rainbow order.
We do have many people asking for video feed with the podcasts, so this would be a perfect video thing. I'm just saying.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a walk around someday.
Someday.
Stay tuned, folks. Someday
we got a flurry of thumbs ups.
Thumbs up to what? Doing more video?
Yes.
I guess.
So
who knows to what?
I find it all. It's very confusing.
So, real quickly, if I go back, just looking to see if there are any questions, as
there have been lots. Yeah.
Yep. Does anybody have one at hand?
Yeah, actually, someone did ask a question. Franco said, interested in your external battery. I assume it powers the tuner. The tuner is the MAT 705 Plus that has a built-in lithium-ion battery, so it charges through a USB-C. So you just have to charge it up once in a blue moon. It seems to hold a charge for quite a while. But the battery that I use is a Bioenno. So I have 4 different sizes. This is the teeny one, which is all you need for this 705 for a couple of hours. And then I get bigger ones for other stuff. So that's, in my opinion, the way to go.
So I'll take the next one, which is, where is my better half, Brittany KF8IJZ? She's asleep. She came home and had a lot of sinus pressure and headache going on. So she actually was very kind to solo with the kids as we went live with this. And I am positive that she has passed out.
Hey, I just realized something. Do you know there's a Q&A tab?
Yeah, there is.
I was in the chat tab. I just noticed there's a Q&A tab.
No, I've been checking it.
Yeah.
So there's one question out there.
There are lots.
I was going to the Maestro question. Can I do that?
Yeah, David.
I'm not going to answer it. I'm just going to get Mike Walker to look at it. So it's not sure if you're taking questions from the Peanut Gallery. And this is from David, VE2GYA. But I am embarking on connecting my Maestro up to the mic with a preamp on my desk. Any comments on do's and don'ts?
Don't. There's enough mic gain if you don't have to, there's enough mic gain in the Maestro. There's a 20 dB boost. I think if you need to go that point, there's something else we need to look at, but I haven't found a mic yet that I have needed an external preamp to. Now, I might have had to take the gain to 100%, but it certainly drove the mic audio level in the radio to the right level. So, but yeah, I would highly recommend you don't have to, because it can just introduce more noise, and I will defer to the audio specialists on that. But
so if the mic is only going to be used on the Maestro, I totally agree with what Mike said. However, reading later from David, he was talking about the audio preamp has 1/4-inch outputs left and rights, which tells me that this is on a mixing board or something like that. So if your intent is to use the mic for multiple different things and take a feed from the preamp or the board or whatever it is, and split your audio and send one of them off to the Maestro, then that is definitely a thing to look for. The output of that board is going to be line level. What I don't know is whether the Maestro has a line level input option. It does. Okay.
Yes, check your levels. You may have to pad it, I think, by 6 dB. Mark, you could probably do the math in your head, but I went and did it one day with the online calculation. I think there's about a 6 dB mismatch. It's still just a tad hot.
So throw 1K in series. If it's a line level input, then the nominal impedance is going to be 600 ohms. Throw a 1K in series, that'll cut it in half, and you can adjust it with mic gain for the rest of it. So
So David replied back, Mark, it looks like you've got the question. He said, maybe pat it. Okay, I'll check. And I will decouple in case of ground issues.
yeah, so the other question he had was about isolation transformers. So if it's all line level and everything's on a shared ground, you can probably get away without an isolation transformer, but now you're creating a ground loop. So that is going to be the kind of thing where RF noise will come in and all kinds of things. You will, I don't want to say never, you will almost never go wrong by throwing a 1-to-1 isolation transformer in series with an audio path. I'm sure there are probably exceptions to that, but this is not one of them. 1-to-1 audio isolation transformers are dirt cheap. I got like a pack of 100 of them from eBay some number of years ago that I'm still working my way through, and I do not regret that purchase. But yeah, just a little 1-to-1 audio isolation transformer in series should be fine.
There's a great question. I want to purchase one of those little Chinese VNAs off eBay. Does anyone have a recommended seller?
Oh,
and that has to go to the guys from New Elec, who have license to sell the Nano VNA. And they put their name in behind it. They sell it with good packaging. So go see them at New Elec, just like that. And I've typed that into the chat window.
Yeah. I like New Elec as a company. They do really good stuff with RTL dongles as well. To be clear, the Nano VNA is open source hardware. So all of the alternate manufacturers, they're not breaking any laws. There's nothing wrong with what they're doing. The designers of the Nano VNA open sourced that design, so it's totally okay for everyone else to be building them. Having said that, there are builders that have better quality than others, and New Elec is a very reputable business.
Yeah. Or as a friend of mine calls it, the Nanovna.
The Novna, that's right.
Nanovna. And on that great note, back to you, Jeremy.
All right. Let's see. I want to make sure.
There's a couple of questions about tuners.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to go to our oldest question that got posted a while ago. So our jury KF7GD, which means that you would have gotten your license just before I did. Zygu XPA 128B with IC705, looking for an HF and 6-meter amp for the 705, want to do soda and rain scatter. Do you have any other suggestions?
I do.
George.
I would buy a Yaesu FT891. I know that's not the answer you're looking for. Why do I say that? Because the Zygu amplifier, by the way, this is not the perfect answer. There's trade-offs here. The Zygu amplifier is about $530. The Yaesu radio is about things. One, now you have two things to mess around with cables and so forth. The other downside to that setup is that you're not going to have seamless interaction between the radio and the amplifier. So if you look at something like the KX3 and the KXPA 100, when you change the bands on the radio, the amplifier changes bands. Everything is seamless. It works exactly the way you wished it would work. With the XPA 125. You have to change the band. There's manual intervention required. If you just go with the radio, with the Yaesu radio, then you have a 100-watt radio. Now you need a tuner if you want a tuner. So that would be another, $100 or $150 or something. But I would consider that. The only downside to the Yaesu approach is I really like the 705's user interface better. I love the spectral display. So this is the trade-off. If you really love the ICOM UI and you don't mind carrying a box, then you could go with that external amp and put up with the manual band switching and that sort of stuff. But if you really want it for soda, that's really kind of a heavy setup. I wouldn't do that. The biggest and heaviest thing I would consider is the 891, and that's about a 7 or 8 pound radio, I think, right there. But it's going to be half the volume of the 705 and the Zygu amp. And Rod has just morphed into a nice cage for an 891. Tell us about that thing,
cool
Rod.
Is this? I'm waiting for these to go live because I have an 891. And one of my beefs with most amateur radio gear is to put it in a decent backpack at 100 watts is difficult. Certainly not while on the move, a la what you used to see at Dayton. But these guys at, what's the name of the company now? Armoloq, ARMOLOQ.com. And they make several products, but this is one of them. And they also make it for the 818, I believe, and the 857. So it looks kind of cool. I can't endorse it yet, but it does look very similar to the other cages we're starting to see emerge on the market.
That 891, by the way, I'm curious what you think about it.
It's sweet. I ended up mounting it in the truck, and I really, really like it because it's got some nice little built-ins, like the little lock to keep the tuner dial from moving around. And the controls are really simple on this thing. So I'm not suggesting you ever drive while working HF. But if I'm pulled over and the light is crud, it's super, super easy to operate and to adjust. It's a nice, simple thing. And by the way, if you've got kids figure it out right away. It's not a very complicated radio.
Someone in the chat's asking for the name of the company again.
The company is armoloq.com. I will put it in the chat.
All right. So just real quickly, because the conversation about the video continues on. If we do end up going to video, somebody called it. We get together every other Friday night to record our episodes, probably about 95% of the time. If we were to do that, the audio podcast would absolutely still continue to go out. It would be that people would watch us do it live, and then the edited post-process version would be available in a podcast. So don't worry. And thanks for the support for the people, again, who are mowing their lawns or walking at lunch for work.
There is a poll for this, Jeremy. That's what started it.
Yeah, so someone named Michael Walker is stirring up some muck.
So the other thing, actually going back to the amp plus 705. So it was funny. I still have my KX3 set up, which I'm gonna sell as soon as I haven't had the time to go through my kit to see everything I have. And George pinged me and said, I'm kind of regretting getting rid of my KXPA 100. Are you going to sell yours? And I said, yeah. And we started talking about how it would interface with the 705. And I said, George, you have a 7300. And I'm 99.9% sure that the 7300 would weigh less than the KXPA. But the 705 is a very dense radio.
Yeah,
it was pretty heavy.
And honestly, surprisingly, and I don't know what the current draw of the 891 is, but I know that some of the ASU radios with the display have a nearly 2 amp current draw and receive. The 7300 is just under an amp with like all the options on, bright screen and the whole 9 yards. I mean, it really is fairly impressive. But yeah, that's my comment.
The funny thing about. Sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so is a Flex 6400. Go ahead.
Nice shot. All of these radios are great. I mean, the 7300, the 705, the 891, these are all really great radios. They're all like well above the, is it a radio I would want to own, right? The question really is like, what do you want to optimize for? So, do you want to optimize for power output? Do you want to optimize for features like creature comforts in the user interface? Like, what do you want to optimize for? And then pick the radio. So like if you said, well, QRP is fine, but I want the really great user experience, 705. If you want the 100 watts as small as you can make a 100 watt radio, 891. If you want both and you're willing to go for a bigger radio, which isn't still not very big, but it's not backpackable, 7300. I mean, these are kind of becoming sort of iconic standard decisions, standard iconic radios. And it just sort of depends on the thing that you can't live without, and then you compromise on some other aspect of it. So the suggestion that the fellow made about, well, Should I use the Zygo amp with my 705? If you love your 705 and you're willing to put up with a little very minor inconvenience on things like band switching, sure. It's a reasonable approach. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that at all. It just depends on what you really want to optimize for.
And I'll add to that. Just remember that learning your radio is a big deal. So one of the things I will put as a favorable comment with adding an amp is, as you get to know your 705, you really know it. So now if you're going to go buy that and then go buy another radio from another manufacturer, now you're going to be switching and your brain's going to explode. That's going to take away from the fun factor. So
there is probably a reason I have two 857s and an FT450, and that's exactly it.
Having
the second best
D700s.
There you go. Having the second or third best radio that you know inside and out is better than the best radio that you really don't know how to operate.
So going back to the questions, Joe N3XLS asks, will this live event be a podcast? Yes, we are recording this. This episode we're technically recording a week early. This episode will go live 2 weeks from last or the Tuesday that just happened. So it'll be in the normal audio rotation.
So what you're saying is in a week and a half.
Yeah.
There we go.
Time math is hard.
That's
next. Robert Morris, KK6BDXJ says, "What are our thoughts about the Miati versus Bioenno LifePo batteries?" I'll start on this one because I've never heard of Miati. What I will say about Bioenno is, as a company, especially as we've gotten to know them over the years, they're just a class act. Kevin's and Johnny, they also they're a sponsor of the expo, and also I think they have a presentation. But their products, I mean, they're good. They have a lot of options. If you have questions, you can call and talk to them. From a service perspective, actually, I've never known anybody who had a problem with one of their batteries that it needed replacing. But the level of support you get from them as a company, I think is worth it. There's a reason why I think they're kind of the darling of the LifePo batteries in amateur radio. Does anybody else have any thoughts?
I have a thought. I have a thought on everything tonight. Sorry.
You always do, George. It's your podcast.
Yeah. So in addition to what you're saying, Jeremy, I would add two other things. One is the Bioenno batteries come with the Anderson power pole connector and a barrel connector already wired in, which I find extremely helpful and handy. So that's like not a big deal. You could easily wire that up to any battery, but it's handy. But here's the thing I would look at, and I don't know the answer, so I'm suggesting this is research for the person that asked the question. You should take a look and see what functions the battery management system board provides in the battery, because the BMSs, the most fundamental thing the BMSs do is balance the cells when they charge. So it has to at least do that. So let's assume that this other brand that I don't know either does that. Now, the Bioenno does some other stuff too. It does a low voltage cutoff. It also does a high voltage cutoff. And I believe there's also a thermal cutoff. So those are all features that you'd like to have in the BMS, the battery management system board, that's built in to a really good battery. So I would take a look at that.
I'll also throw a plug out there for Marcel, confirm in the chat whether you're talking this weekend about battery management system. That seems to be your go-to these days. Yep, there we go. So Marcel just pasted a YouTube link in the chat room. We'll make sure it gets into the show notes. He has some videos on YouTube talking about building batteries and how the batteries work. I'm not trying to suggest that if you're looking at buying a battery and you don't want the battery to be a project, that you go build a battery. Like if you want the battery to be an appliance, buy the battery. I'm not trying to suggest you build one, but the advantage of these videos is that they show you how the battery packs are built, what goes into them, what the components are, what the BMS is, what the individual cells are, and all that stuff. And he does a very good job of explaining that. So shameless plug out for Marcel. Marcel Stieber, AI6MS. If you search for that on YouTube, you'll find his channel, and he's got all kinds of videos about battery packs.
And I'll add one more thing here, because I'm seeing a lot of love for the LDG tuner products when we're having a conversation about that a few minutes ago. One of the things that's nice with hanging out with these guys is I can say pretty much universally every time we've been on one of these discussions about products like LDG, even when they're sponsors, they don't get to be sponsors on this show without people feeling super comfortable about it, because you don't want to be called out on that. So I don't know if George or Jeremy, you want to add to that, but I've always felt really comfortable with things that have been sponsored on this show.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually our entire approach with sponsoring is we would never have a sponsor for our show that offered a product we didn't believe in. In fact, in most of our cases, we approach a lot of our sponsors because we really love what they're doing in their products. I own and have owned many LDG tuners over the years. In fact, actually with my 7300 Go box, it's paired with a trusty AT100 Pro 2. And they're bulletproof, plug and play. They tune every time. I mean, they're fantastic.
Can I tell my LDG story? And so a number of years back with the Oakville Amateur Radio Club, someone handed me a piece of feed line set up for field day. Rod's heard this story before. Rod was there for the story. Somebody handed me a piece of feed line. I noticed it was a little bit damp. So I take a towel and I wipe off the PL259. I did not know how damp it was. Plugged it into the back of my tuner, started setting up. No, it wasn't quite that bad, Mark. It was not dripping, but I'm surprised it wasn't. Well, 2 hours later, I'm like, what's that smell? And I put my hand on the tuner, and I could just about cooked an egg on it. And I let the magic smoke out of my tuner. I uttered a few bad words in Canadian, and I proceeded
golly
to
gosh.
Golly gosh, and a.
Careful, we're going to have to get an explicit tag now.
I proceeded to run a piece of feed line out to the trunk of my car, and instead of running the dipole that somebody had strung in the air for me, I ran off my ATAS screwdriver antenna for the rest of it. Fast forward 5 years later, I've moved across country now. I'm in VE6 land, and I opened my box up, and I'm like, oh yeah, this LTG tuner, I should send it away to get it fixed. It'd be good in my Go kit. It was a Z100 tuner. It was the first Z100 tuner shipped into Canada. And so I sent it down to them, and LDG's got really great customer service. This is really what the story is about. And so I sent it down to them, and I tuck in a letter. Dear LDG, please inspect unit. Mike says I'm an idiot, but I'm not. Magic smoke let out of unit. Please advise on cost to reinstall magic smoke and ship back to me here in Canada. Thank you so much. And I get back an email from them 2 weeks later. Dear Vince, we are so sorry, but the smoke is now unobtainium for your model of tuner. However, we will offer you a trade-in on that tuner. And they came back to me with a price that amounted to be incredibly generous to take my old tuner back and turn me into their biggest evangelist north of the 49th. And about half of retail price. And so this is how I landed up with my Z11 Pro 2, which now sits on my bench and is connected to my FT450. And you can bet your bottom dollar that anybody who wants to hear about a tuner hears this story. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
And we made a lot of points that year on field day.
And we
can I tell a story about the first time that I had an LDG tuner? I mean, since we're telling stories. So,
sure.
Young Ham had just gotten my license, for those of you in the Pacific Northwest, at the Puyallup Ham Fest way back in 2009. Had been in Seattle for a few months. Drove down there in a frosty morning. Was so excited after I completed the exam. I didn't know you had to wait for them to give you the little slip. Like, I literally just left and went back out to the Ham Fest being like, I passed. I knew it. Fortunately, somebody came and found me, said, you got to come back, and they have to tell you that, and you're going to get a slip of paper. But anyway, I was just a lowly technician, but I happened across, by meeting somebody in the repeater, an amazing deal on an ICOM IC7000. And I drove out to the guy's house, big station at his house, big yard, all these antennas, like all these like contesting grade rigs. And, he had talked about he bought the radio for field day, but as it turns out, he doesn't really get out much anymore. And so he's just getting rid of old stuff. Made me a great deal on it. Came with an LDG. It was I can't remember the model. It's the ICOM, like it might be the IC100, something like that. And I was a technician, so I knew I couldn't really transmit very much. I had a buddy pole, and the apartment I lived at in Seattle had a beautiful rooftop. So one night, it's dark, got all this stuff together. I trudge everything up to the rooftop. I plug the radio in, and I hook up the tuner, and I know I had 10-meter privileges. So I was like, well, I'll start there in case I hear anything and I can talk. I didn't actually know what a tuner was. I didn't know what it would do. And when I hit the tune button, I thought that somebody had turned on a table saw and thrown all of the china and silverware and anything jangly. I was terrified. Like, I did everything I could to pull. Yeah. I had no idea that that's exactly what that was supposed to do, because those are latching relays that are working out the solution so that the power draw is nil. But yeah. In fact, actually, now that I think about it, we should recommend to them that in every box, just in case it's somebody's first time, there should just be a sticker. Warning, this box makes uncomfortable noises. Actually, we should put that warning on our podcast.
I think that was the very first automatic tuner I ever bought. The person that sold it to me said, okay, before you go home, take your large can of change, shake it really loud. That's what this is going to sound like. And it was great advice, because of that very first time is terrifying. You're going, what did I break? Am I doing it wrong? Hey, we got another question on here.
Hold on, Rod, because Jeremy nailed it. I'm trying to think back to the 90s, to my first, I didn't have to tune the MFJ 949 tuner. And it was the same thing. You make an absolute point. Who knew? Anyway, thanks.
Very good. So Charles Reed Dixon, W1YMI, has said, I just joined, new to HF. I'm setting up a shack. I have an FT991A end-fed dipole, but I can't reach Southern California, and I think he's saying from Northern Utah. Any suggestions?
Move?
What band?
Sorry, I couldn't read.
No, lower your antenna, actually. What band?
Yeah, lower your antenna. Exactly.
It doesn't say what band. Charles, can you give us any ideas?
So you probably want to use a lower band, like 40 meters or 80 meters, and then get your antenna. Yeah, exactly. Art Jury just said it. NVIS. Get your antenna closer to the ground, like 8 to 10 feet above the ground. And what that does is that ends up using the Earth like a reflector, and your dipole is here, your Earth is here, and it sends most of your energy straight up into the sky. And you're basically lighting up the sky like city lights, right? You know how when you're nearby, you can see the sky lights light off the clouds nearby. You're doing the same thing, but with 40-meter energy or whatever.
He says he's on 80.
He says he's on 80. And so my 80-meter dipole is up at about 35 feet. And I'm routinely working within Alberta, northern Alberta, into northern BC, southern British Columbia, and across the western provinces at that height. So it's suboptimal. It's not a half wavelength. It's probably closer to a quarter, and I get that kind of hop distance, and I would suggest that's comparable to what he's trying to do from Utah into California.
Yeah, Bill Mader is saying that they should be 0.1 to 0.25 wavelengths above ground. Should be is for optimal. It doesn't matter. Like, the reality is, wherever your antenna is, it's going to have a radiation pattern, and there will be people there. If you are explicitly trying to get to a specific distance, then adjust the height of your antenna until you find the distance that gets the right skip zone. Time of day will also matter. 80 meters is going to be better at night than in the day, in the middle of the day, that kind of stuff.
You might want to also try prior to sunrise in the morning, actually just after sunrise in the morning.
Gray line?
Less gray line, actually, as you come out of gray line and it starts to shorten up again. Before gray line, sure, we're into Hawaii, we're into New Zealand from there, but after, it'll really collapse. And then you'll get this very long ground wave. So,
in the spirit of giving you an excuse for something to buy, what you can try, if you want to do a little sort of scientific experiment, in air quotes, is get yourself a whisper transmitter, like the Whisper Light, and set it up on your antenna and let it go. and see what your propagation looks like over a few days, and then start to tinker with your antenna. Try to, like everybody's suggesting, lower the antenna or do, whatever you're going to do to it, and try it again and see. Now, obviously, if you do a measurement on Monday, you do it again a week later on the next Monday, other things could be changing. It's not just your antenna, so it's not really a controlled experiment.
Yeah.
Close enough, but you could probably see some net effect of the changes.
Right. And if you go to Whisper Map and just watch it all through the day on 80, you will see those paths open. So you can even do it without investing in a Whisper Light transmitter. Mark.
But here's what I'm going to suggest, Charles. Go and buy yourself, this is going to sound weird, a nice antenna switch. Like something that you can put right beside your rig. Why? Because everything else is cheap. The coax is cheap, and well, relatively, and wire antennas are cheap. Go put something else up. Go put a vertical up, and then while you're working on something, just to see what you can hear and what you can reach, switch between those antennas. Contesters do this all the time. So you'll try 80 meters on a vertical, 80 meters on a dipole. Who knows what else you can dream up, but switch in between those antennas. And the other thing, if you're fairly new to this good stuff, staying on one band or a couple of bands isn't such a bad idea until you really learn the band.
I love the recommendation for the antenna switch. I mean, every time that my club goes out for portable operation, even if oftentimes, because for us it's as much about the camaraderie and the fellowship and whatnot as it is the operating, we'll put 2 or 3 antennas up, even if we're only running a single operating position. And for dipoles, we'll adjust their height and then make sure they're 90 degrees to one another. And then the LDG tuners, a lot of them have 2 antenna ports, so you can switch right in there. Or I've got my trusty old 4-port, the Daiwa click, 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 antenna switcher as well. But that's a great tip, especially with wire antennas.
Cool.
All right, what else do we have for questions? Q&A
PSK Reporter's good too. There's so many online tools that'll talk to you. Jeremy, while you're looking for questions, there's so many online tools about that. And we were actually doing a talk on LAN in the Ham Shack just tomorrow on how important the LAN, the internet's become as part of the Ham Shack for this sort of information. So
on the subject, on the subject of PSK Reporter and whatnot, look at that waterfall.
It's a little hot.
That's a little hot.
It's a little hot, yeah.
So explain what we're looking at, Mark.
It looks like your next door neighbor is going crazy.
Yeah. Chainsaw.
So this is the waterfall for 40 meters FT8 right now at my house in Arroyo Grande, California. So you were talking about PSK Reporter and Whisper and whatnot. That's actually what the subject of my talk will be tomorrow. Those are a bunch of FT8 and Whisper instances of WSJTX receiving on 4 different bands and whatnot. So little sneak peek of my presentation tomorrow. That's the waterfall from my 40 meter FT8 receiver right now, which I just thought was interesting and thought we would talk about it. Anyway, point being that there are stations all over the net or all over the world that are receiving both FT8 all the time and sending them off to a spotting network like PSK Reporter, and also receiving Whisper all the time and sending the spots off to whispernet.org. And my talk is about running all of those simultaneously. Anyway, so you don't even need to have a transmitter if you don't want to. You can set up a receiver and figure out what you can hear from your location, and that will also give you an indication, because propagation paths tend to be symmetric. In fact, the receive path tends to be harder than the transmit path a lot of the times, because your receive path is subject to local noise, whereas your transmit path is subject to the other person's local noise.
So, Mark, a quick question. Your waterfall is red hot. Is that the noise that you still have in your area?
So I definitely still have noise, but that you'll notice that one was kind of at a swath. Yeah. So when you're listening to a band and you kind of hear it come up from the low frequencies, and then it comes right into the middle of your receive, and then it goes off and you hear it in the high frequencies, that's what that was. That was a noise source working its way through the audio passband of the FT8 band. I just happened to be adjusting my WSJTXs because I just realized that I had never changed my call sign. I was still reporting KR6ZY on all my spots, so I went through and changed all that to N6MTS. But when I did that, it brought up that waterfall, and I saw that, and I'm like, ooh, let me share this. So yeah, that's a noise source. I don't know what it's from. Could be atmospheric, could be some piece of equipment somewhere nearby that's spitting out noise. Yeah, it's a it's a little wide to be a woodpecker, but yeah, something like that, right? I did not know what that was, but
it's the angry woodpecker.
Yeah, but I just like how you could see it moving across the band, which I thought was interesting.
I got to tell you, but one thing I discovered I'm about to do a shameless plug for Flex Radio. I just want to brace everybody for this. So, thanks. So I've got 3 computer monitors that are all hooked together on my desktop computer. So I launched the Smart SDR software, and it can smear it out to take up 2 of the monitors. So I get this massive spectral display, and I was tuning around 5 megahertz, and I see some stuff on the screen, and like there's a carrier, and it's like walking up in frequency and then going back and walking up and going back and then like, so I mean, I know there's a lot of weird digital modes out there, not ham modes, but like commercial modes. And it was the first time I've really seen a lot of these, probably military kind of stuff, and like a lot of sweeping. It's like really wild to look at some of these signals.
Have you watched the Ionosods?
Maybe that. I described one of these to somebody, and they thought that's what it was. I never even heard of that before.
So you've seen them, you'll be on the air on 80 or something, and you go, oh, here it comes, and it goes whoosh, as it goes through your passband. And so if you go out to full 8 or 16 megahertz, depending which unit you have, you can sit there and watch the signal go by, and they use it for propagation testing, right? So I assume there's a transmitter. I haven't dug into it. I'm sure some of our listeners know more about it than I do, but there's a transmitter in Utah and a receiver in Florida, and he's in their time synchronized, right? But the interesting thing I was told by somebody who knows of a brother-in-law that knows is it stops in places and then comes back on, and those are the military frequencies, apparently.
So is this a propagation, like a sounding system?
It's a sounding tool, yeah.
Okay. Well, it makes sense. But the sweep was weird, though. It wasn't like it went across a very large spectrum. So it was like maybe moved 100 kilohertz, which it didn't seem like, why would you bother moving? I mean, I don't understand why it, anyway.
So I think it was power supply.
Actually, you know what? It could have been the wall wart for all I know.
Next time you see it, let me know, because we should go look and see if we see it on the same frequency, because I have seen them even on 80. I thought it was one of my switchings in the remote.
So I've seen them where it's a very narrow or a very defined bandwidth where it goes boop, boop, boop,
yes.
boop. I've seen those.
Yeah.
Over the horizon radar or something. I don't know exactly what it is, but yeah, it's some sort of a I like when station, who knows?
And it's like you hear this phasing effect, and in the waterfall you see like 10 lines going up in a pattern. So Mike, real quickly, there's a question in the Q&A from Doug Berkey, KB8M. Doug asks, is there a good way to be able to operate single sideband when using VNC? I have no issues when doing FT8, but I'm not sure how to deal with audio for single sideband. I'm assuming that's a Flex question. Maybe it's not.
So that's actually built into the radio. When if you're using a Flex, which I guess you are, and you're using SmartLink, which is what you want to use. And yes, this is a very common question, and you set that up. Chapter 9 of the manual walks you through it. George figured it out, so I'm sure anybody else
can figure it out. Yeah, thanks. Buddy.
Yeah. And you end up running Smart SDR on your local to you PC, and it'll automatically connect to the radio, and it will use the default sound devices in your computer. So if your USB Logitech headset microphone is your default microphone, that's how you get the sideband out, and audio comes back in the same ears. We use the default device. And the way we do that, the reason we do that, well, why can't I pick any one of seven other devices, is because we have to think of stuff from a supportability issue and how do you post-sale support. So it just has to work. So if you've got your headset working normally or microphone, then you're good to go. Probably have a video of that on the YouTube, on Flex Radio web channel. Go to YouTube and Flex Radio and look for the one that says, my friend said I could use their radio remotely, and it goes through all the steps.
So he wasn't talking about a Flex. He said, sorry, he has an FT891 and something called signaling.
Ask George.
No, that's a bad... George would call you.
In all identity, well, thanks for another shameless plug. So there are other tools. You could figure out how to hook up a remote rig device, which is a point-to-point audio tunnel. I actually have one here because I'm doing some testing on some other stuff with it, and it'll hand your push-to-talk, your mic, and your receive audio. And that'll work if that's all you need.
They work great on AC radios.
They work great. You have to do a bit of networking skills to do it. It's not
not
like
a plug
what
and
we've
play.
done with. It's not a plug and play. You've got to understand a bit of networking.
So real quickly, let me interrupt because we're coming up on the 2-hour mark and not showing any signs of stopping. Rather than taking a formal break, what I would like to offer to our hosts is, so folks like myself, I'm going to get up and go grab a refresher. If folks on our panel need to get up and go, just mute and turn your camera off, and that way we can keep the fun going. Also, there is an explosion of questions in the chat, so I will kick it off with, I like this one a lot. John R. Andres asks, what are the most common sources of RFI noise within the house? I'm at S9 on HF, and he's specifically asking about 40 meters. Mark, I know you have had to deal with this.
Yeah. So my experience has not been a good one. There's something in my neighborhood that's just generating wideband noise. It's not in my house because I've shut off the entire power to my house and turned off all the battery operated things, and it didn't go away. But we just have a high noise floor, right? So it's not like a defined bandwidth noise source. It's just the entire floor is raised up. That's mostly what I have to deal with here. I don't know if it's like a sparky power pole around the neighborhood or what it is. That's mostly what I have to deal with. But there are a lot of switching power supplies is really what it boils down to. Cheap, inexpensive switching power supplies. And the problem is that there are switching power supplies in more places than you would imagine. The most common excuse that people use these days are LED lights, inexpensive LED lights. Excuse me. Because if you get a light bulb that screws into a light socket, you got 120 volt AC or 240 volt or wherever you live, whatever your local voltage is, 100 volt or more AC signal coming in, but those LEDs are 2.2 volt devices, right? And usually you'll put a bunch of them in a series to increase the total voltage, but not up to 120 volts unless you're talking about like Christmas lights. That's a different thing. But these bulbs typically have a little tiny switching power supply that take 120 AC in and put out 5 volts, 12 volts, whatever, some sort of a low voltage DC signal output. But they're producing these things in bulk, and they want them to be small and cheap, and so they leave off all of the RFI testing, all of the RFI prevention, filtering and whatnot. And so all of these little tiny LEDs, like each individual one may be Part 15 compliant, but the Part 15 rules were written when you had 5, maybe 10 Part 15 devices in your house, not literal hundreds of them. And so now just the noise floor is just creeping up and up and up and up, and it's a real problem. So if you think you have a noise source that's in your house, the obligatory way to do that is go around, excuse me, and start turning things off. If you don't know, if you don't want to turn off individual devices, you can go to start here, go to your breaker panel, shut off the entire house, just kill power to the entire house and see if it goes away. That will at least tell you whether it's in your house or not. And if it doesn't go away when you kill power to your house, then it's not something in your house. And you need to go drive around the neighborhood or walk around with a little directional antenna or just a little battery-powered receiver and see if you can find, do a T-hunt. Basically, you're doing a T-hunt for a noise source and see if you can find it. If you turn off the power to your house and the noise does go away, that's a little bit easier because now you've narrowed it down to your house. What's that?
Be happy. Be
Yeah,
happy.
Yeah, and then start
control
going
the
through the
answer.
breakers one at a time.
Exactly, and then you go through and do the breakers one at a time. Exactly. So you kind of hope that it's in your house because you're in complete control of that situation and you can fix it. When it's not in your house, then
I had the
other
strangest
one-
problem with my last QTH that was ran parallel to the street. It was about 70 feet back from the street. And at the street, there were 15 kilovolt lines that ran. And I moved into the property, and boy, the buzz was horrific. Shut off the panel, first thing I do. Geez, buzz doesn't go away. I wonder what it could be. And I walk with my handy-talkie over to the alarm panel, and the buzz gets really, really loud. Call the alarm company out. A week later, the guy comes out. He unplugs my battery to de-energize the alarm panel. Once again, I repeat the trick. Pull the house breaker. Now what did I discover? As I'm walking along where the wires run, I get out to a sensor at the far end of the house. Well, what's at the end of a dipole wire, folks? It's high voltage or high current. I can never keep that straight, but my handy-talkie sure heard it coming right off the end of that wire. And the only thing I can surmise was happening was the 15 kilovolts was being induced about 70 feet back into the cheapo alarm wire that my system was. It's crazy where you find this stuff. How did I solve that? Ferrites on the wires leading into my panel.
Yep. Oh yeah, thank you. That's the the part of the question that we didn't address is how do you solve these problems? Once you found the noise source, how do you fix it? Well, you can replace the device that is noisy and find one that doesn't have noise. That's one option. Another option is like if it's a device that has a cord on it and the noise is coming from the cord, which is pretty likely because that cord acts like an antenna. You might be able to choke off that noise using some ferrites, either some clip-on ferrites, or if the connector on the end of that cord is small enough and you can wrap it around a toroid, go buy yourself some ferrite toroids like this, wrap the wire through it a few times, math calculators to figure out how many is ideal, but you just wrap it around a bunch of times. It won't be perfect, but it'll be good enough. And the toroidal transformer or chokes will be more effective than the clamp-on ones because the total inductance, which is what you're trying to add to the wire, goes up with the square of the number of turns. So if you just put one clamp on there, that's one turn. If you put another clamp on there, that's two turns, right? But it's linear when you're adding the clamp on.
Yeah, it's not even two turns. It's like
1.2
50
turns.
ohms plus 50 ohms. It's 100 ohms.
Yeah. Whereas if I do two loops through this, it would be 50 ohms squared, whatever anyway, it goes up with the square. Wrap it around a toroid if you can. If the connector on the end will let you wrap it through the toroid.
And by the way, if you have something out at the street, so a mutual friend of Mike Walker's and myself chased this very issue down. If it comes off of one of your power delivery poles, okay, or something that the utility controls, it is amazing how cooperative your local utility will be, particularly if it's something that gets worse during windstorms or worse during rainstorms or something along that line. And you can chase down a physical location. You may actually be helping them chase down a very wide area problem for them. And it's incredible how fast trucks show up and check stuff out.
My local power company is PG&E. Maybe you've heard about them. Not caring about their infrastructure. Not all power companies are as responsive as we would like them to be.
Mark, you should be grateful they just didn't start a fire and burn down the town.
Since I lived amongst the tribes of the South for a while, as you know, one of the things I found with PG&E is you have to alert them to a level 3 profitability alert coming their way.
And I've got to say, this is the whip off my, I guess it's probably a quarter wave on 2 meters, but it's off my frequency counter. And I just go around and hold it up to stuff and you'll hear it and you'll hear a lot, and you'll have to decide if that's really radiating more than an inch or two away from the unit. But I had my best story is this Cisco switch that I picked up at a flea market for $10. It was 100 meg. It was good enough for me. It was a big 1U PoE phone switch, for power over Ethernet for the phones. And it took noise up to 170 meg. And once I went through it, but Mark, was it you saying with the alarm system? Yes, I found mine the same thing. And of course, you turn the power off to the house, it doesn't go away until you think
it's battery powered. Yeah,
because it's battery powered, right? Anyway, so that's how you do it. And you don't need a 705, but it really helps if you have any handheld that does AM. So my VX7R, and most of them do today, put it at about 100 megs, 120 megs, walk around with the antenna on, it gets really loud, take the antenna off, put it right beside it. If it's still really loud, guess what? You found your spark gap generator, and you'll figure out your own rhythm. But George,
so I found that you mentioned 2 meters, Mike. I found that around here 2 meters seems to be a very likely destination for noise. I get a lot of general interference inside the house on 2 meters more than UHF. Also, just a good old cheap AM radio. If you remember AM radio, at the other end of the spectrum, that's
transistor radio.
Yeah, a little transistor radio. That's a handy way to just kind of buzz around your house. Again, do the same thing. Move it by all your wall warts and anything that's plugged in.
So Charles, in the name went by Charles Dixon, asked what size toroids. The size of the toroid is purely mechanical. The more important question to ask is what mix of toroid. And the short answer is get an FT type toroid, not a T type toroid. So like this is an FT 140, which the 140 is the size of the toroids. Yep. See, Mike's got a bunch there.
Told you I buy them by the pack of 50s.
Yeah, I got a pack over there as well. The 140 means 1.4 inches outside diameter. So that's just the physical size of the toroid. Dash 43. Dash 43 or dash 31. Is that the other?
Yeah,
31 mix. 43 mix or 31 mix are the two that are good for HF, for choking and whatnot.
To hop on that.
For lower.
Thank you.
Yeah, 31 for the lower bands, 43 for the higher stuff.
Yeah, and for if you're going to split the difference, either one is fine. I mean, it's by degrees. It's not a binary thing.
Yeah. All right.
There's a document. One last thing. If you Google contests, Yankee Contest Clipper Club, and choke, there's a PDF document come up. It's the first hit on Google. Print that off and read it. And there are more. Jim K9YC does. K9? Here's the 6. K6YC does a whole bunch of stuff on it as well. But the one I mentioned first is very easy reading, and you're going to go, oh, I need some more chokes. And don't buy 2. Buy 40.
All right.
If you
put them at each end of your feed line, by the way. So they go at the radio and at the antenna. And start with 40 meters. You will notice two things. You're going to be able to hear better, and you're not going to have any, when I'm transmitting, RFI issues. I couldn't believe the difference. It was night and day when I started.
All right. I'm going to move on to the next question, which is from Robert Morris, KK6BXJ, which I actually think I have something to say on this one. Robert asks, when I transmit CW or whistle with 50 plus watts on my IC7100, the voltage drops below 10 volts and the radio restarts. Power supply is an MFJ something. Is this the radio or power supply? I'm going to say neither.
It's your wire.
It's your wire. Hold on. Very specifically, if you were using the power cable that came with the ICOMs of a certain vintage running back from probably the 706 all the way through the 7100, what would happen is the little ATC fuse that's in line with that, what I would do is take that thing out and put it back in and out several times. Because what I learned with my 7000, because I had similar things happen, is that the crud builds up in the resistance in the line gets such that the when you put load on, when you transmit and put a load, the voltage drops significantly. And that would actually be the first thing I would look at. Now, Mark, you were emphatically shaking your head, and so was George.
No, I just thought you were going to go that it's most likely the power supply, but you're right. It's anywhere that can add. You have resistance in your power supply. As soon as you start drawing current, the voltage drops, which means you have some sort of a resistor between your radio and the power supply. The fuse could be that resistor, the connectors on the fuse, the wire itself, if the wire has problem, the power supply itself could have a high internal impedance. There are a lot of different things that could cause that.
Now, I don't know what the rating of this particular MFJ power supply is, because there's also the possibility, if it's a switcher, I think some power supplies can be susceptible to RFI, and you can cause the thing to shut down.
Do we know what the power supply model is?
Yes, it is a 4225-Mike Victor.
MFJ, yeah.
That's a
I'm
switcher.
not an MFJ. I am not an MFJ hater. So I'm not sitting here going, "Oh, it's MFJ. It's crap. That must be the problem." That's not what I'm saying. But
yeah, if we find
saying,
out it's a 1 amp power supply, then there's your problem.
well, yeah, then there's your problem. Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's a 30 amp intermittent duty, 25 amp continuous style switching supply, if I remember my specs correctly.
It's almost like you work in a ham radio store.
You never know.
Yeah.
Can I make a recommendation about how to debug it?
Go.
No.
So what you want to do is take your voltmeter, right? You got your voltmeter? Got your voltmeter? Everybody owns a voltmeter, right? And you're going to put the radio at full power, and you're going to measure the voltage at the back of the power supply and see what happens the way it fails. And if it trips off, good. That's good, because we still have the problem. We can solve it. Now do the same thing. Take the leads, jam them in the back of the connector. There's enough room to do that, and do the same test. And if you notice that and this is one of those times that an analog meter is so much better, because you can see the needle dip, but you want to, you're going to go into full power, and then you're going to see if the voltage there drops to 10. Just slowly increase the power in CW mode or RTTY or FM, and watch it. If you get to 20 watts and it's sagging a volt, or you get to 30 watts and it's sagging a volt and a half, then yeah, it's probably the cable. And it doesn't take a lot of impedance or resistance. It only takes less than an ohm to drop that fire. It's if you quickly do Ohm's law, you'll quickly figure out you're dropping about let's assume your power supply is about 14 volts. So you're dropping 4 volts. So, there's 2 ohms of resistance in there. And I think you're going to find, as we said in the beginning, it's the cable.
Could be a bad connector. If you have one of those really lousy inline fuses, by the way, those are often a failure point. Those are the cheap where there's like a plastic clamshell with a fuse inside with 2 little clips.
I love those.
And the clips kind of like they're sort of just a bent piece of metal around the tips of the fuses.
They're awful.
Yeah, those are awful. So you should get rid of that and replace it with an ATC automotive inline fuse. Get like with a real fuse connector. It could just be something as simple as the little clips are bent and it's not making a good connection. And to Mike's point, it's presenting a high resistance connection. Also, which radio were we talking about? The 7300, I think you said?
7100.
7100.
Okay, so 7100 is going to be pulling somewhere between 20 and 23 amps peak on transmit, I would bet. And that power supply is rated for continuous duty at 21 amps. So
35, I thought.
Well, and he said he was doing 50 watts.
Oh, okay, well, it should work.
12. It should be fine.
It should be fine. Yeah, I would say it's somewhere in the wiring too, or in the connectors.
Oh, here's a good question. How do you know the mix of a toroid when there's no markings on the toroid?
Oh, that's a great question.
There's a whole show.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Label.
So
there's a video. There's a guy that did a video about this. I can't remember his name. Oh, that's going to drive me crazy now. And he set it up in his garage with some really simple tools, and somebody's going to remember it. And then I'm going to bookmark it on my own website so that I never forget this again. But he showed with some very simple tests how you can do that.
I know how to do it with the VNA.
All right, moving on to our next question. Comes from Michael Ramos, AE0.
Wait, ding, ding, ding. Sorry, timeout. I'm sorry, Jeremy, but I before I completely forget, I know the video you're talking about, Vince. So if I could just hop onto that. So the video is called "How to Identify an Unknown Ferrite Core." Very cleverly titled.
And it's from the guy at Fairrite, isn't it?
It's from the guy. Yes. So Fairrite, which is kind of F-A-I-R-R-I-T-E. Fairrite is a manufacturer of ferrites, F-E-R-R-I-T-E. So anyway, they're a very good, reputable brand. So this guy's like an applications engineer or something for Fairrite. And so he goes through, it's a great video.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, Jeremy.
I will find the link.
Okay. All right,
We got
back to AE0IH's question. This is an antenna question. Michael writes, I'm currently using a Lab 599 TX500 for SOTA. I don't know if that's a radio, probably.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Is that the aluminum?
That's
like
the
all
milled
heat-sink one?
aluminum
Yep.
solid block. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right,
But
with a
George
link
hasn't ordered yet.
He ordered 3 of them for SOTA with a link dipole and tactical mini mast on 40 and 20 meters sideband. What are some efficient and easy to set up antennas for adding 17 meter into the mix, considering end-fed half wave with a SOTA tuner or random wire ? Doublet ?
End-fed half wave is really easy, no tuner required. And 17 meters is short because the actual half wavelength is only going to be 8.5 meters. So 20 feet. That's super easy. Mark?
So actually, can I ask a question about this, because this might help the reader, listener, person who asked the question? I didn't catch the name. Can you put a trap on an end-fed half wave?
Why would you put it on the end?
No, sorry. Can you trap an end-fed half wave to make it a multi-band antenna, like you can with a dipole?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Yes.
So I just saw advertised on Twitter yesterday that there's a seller on Tindy who is selling these little tiny itty bitty traps. It's a toroid with a little tiny board that's in the middle of the toroid with a capacitor on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're super small, super lightweight, QRP only, but you can make these little traps. I bought 3 of them for 10 meters, 15, and 20 meters with the intention of making a 10, 15, 20, and 40 dipole and end-fed. And I wanted to kind of play with this and test it. And so I bought 3 of each of those traps to be able to make 2 different antennas.
Yeah, that should work. I've never done that. I mean, if you do an end-fed half wave on, let's say, 40 meters, it will actually work on even harmonics. So without any traps, it'll work on 40, 20, and 10 meters. But if you want something odd like 17 meters, then you could put a trap in there. Yeah, I don't see any reason why not. I've never done it, but
if I don't think it would be multi-band at that point, or it would be much more complex because the inductance will affect each of the different bands, each of the different harmonics differently.
But that's how you do any sort of trap antenna. I mean, you would make the first segment up to the trap, tune that to where you put the trap, and then add some random length of wire till it's tuned to the next band, and then you put the trap on there, and you just hope that the end impedance doesn't screw it up much when you do that.
Well, yeah, but the point is, though, that's if you do that, that's going to break the 40 meters will now work on all even harmonics.
Yeah, that's out the door.
That's the point that I was trying to make.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, as soon as you put the traps in there, that even harmonic thing doesn't
out the
apply.
window.
Yeah, forget that.
All right.
So the question of making a 17 meter, if you wanted to make it multi-band, look at those traps from Tindy. I'll see if I can get a link.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Next, John, our friend John Linthicum, W6TRF says, we've heard Mike comment about how he used the 705, which he just kind of demonstrated. John is just pointing out that would be a great show topic is discovering and diagnosing RFI issues. So I agree. We should add that to the list. Next, wideband rate. Sorry, Dave Philfield. I'm sorry, 86A. Wideband raised noise floor is most likely cheap solar controllers. This has been my experience. Okay, thanks for the tip, Dave. Next, Dave Snyder, K7DES. I used to have a neighbor that had a big wood shop out back, and every time he turned on his dust collection, It raised my noise floor about 6 dB across the whole spectrum. We figured out it was just before he moved to a retirement home. Then the new homeowner took out the dust collector.
He moved to a retirement home, huh?
Yeah. The new homeowner took out the dust collector and turned the shop into an art studio. So problem solved. All right,
So,
that's it.
Moral of the story is help your elderly friends move.
Be the first to offer.
Real friends. Oh, never mind.
Yes, I
So
know.
if you're interested in those tiny trap antennas, if you go to Tindy and search for Tiny Antenna Trap Kit.
And
The
thank you
seller-
to Grant who posted the link for us,
Oh,
which is
perfect.
awesome.
Yeah, so, but for people who are listening to this later and don't get to see the chat, the seller is HB9ZHK. So Hotel Bravo 9 Z Hotel Kilo is the seller on Tindy. They're $5 each. I'm like, $5 was a shut up and take my money kind of price.
So
you can
one
make them for a lot cheaper if you want, but that's easy. Sorry, go on.
One comment that I'll address is so Bill Mater KTE in the comment said better use lengths that do not resonate, making the end fed easier to match. End fed wires require counterpoise to work efficiently. So want to address that is that you're correct depending on what the matching unit is. If you're using a 9-to-1 random wire end fed, you absolutely don't want to aim for a resonant length. If you're using a 50-to-1 end fed half wave instead of an end fed random wire, then you do want to make sure that that is resonant. And of course, as we covered in our wire intent episode, the counterpoise is always recommended because something is going to be the counterpoise, and if you're not careful, it's going to be you.
So, by the way, if you're using a end-fed half wave, and you're not using an explicit counterpoise wire, you're just relying on the coax as a counterpoise. That will often work fine because what you're going to do is you're going to cut the length of the antenna wire to make the antenna resonant, and the length of the half wave part has to interact with the counterpoise, which it winds up being the shield of your coax. So you can kind of tune that system by changing the length of the main piece of wire generally, and that often works even without a counterpoise. Your mileage may vary.
All right, let's see if there are any other new questions. There was a comment about a couple brands of solar controllers that are quiet. So Enphase IQ7 Plus and IQ7, IQ7 Plus. Of course, our favorite portable solar power controllers are the Genesons, which are also RF quiet.
I run an Outbacker, and it's also very good.
Is it a portable Outbacker or is it a home?
It is screwed into the battery bay of my RV Outbacker. So I would suggest that's a portable, a home style unit, not a portable style unit.
The way that Mark's Go Kit is a Prius and therefore portable?
Yes.
Okay.
It's an Alberta thing.
Yes, my RV also has 3 feed lines into it for the operating position from the outside.
I thought you were going to say that your RV could beat up my RV.
No, I'm not going to go there.
I don't have one, so.
So another one that's worth looking at is the Buddy Pole Power Buddy. I forget what it's called. Jeremy? You must know what that thing is.
I don't remember, but yeah, Buddy Pole has a really awesome charge controller. That's a box, has power poles, has a display, because you can customize not only what battery chemistry are you charging, but you can also you can customize all the points in the curve. So for instance, if you guys were to look at my big LifePo, I forget what the packs are called, but my big LifePo battery, the peak voltage for charge is 14.2 volts versus a BioN is 14.6, and they let you set that. I don't remember what it's called, but yeah, it's a very nice contraption. Well, actually, Mark, didn't you buy the Epic Power Gate that had the charge controller built into it? I assume that is also RF quiet.
Yeah, it is. So I have an Epic Power Gate. It has a solar charge controller, but I've never hooked up a solar panel to it. The panels that I have, from reasons, they're 40 volt panels, and this is a 12 volt panel system. So I have not been able to and I've never gone out to buy a high current 12 volt panel. So I don't know how quiet the charge controller is, but it's MPPT and it's done by
West Mountain Radio.
Yeah, West Mountain Radio, and they've got a good reputation, so I would expect it to be good.
It's a ham accessory, so one would hope.
Yeah, I would expect it to be good.
I love this question. Jerry Jurens N2GJ, that's a mouthful for a four character call. Asks, Mark, is the D710 a touchscreen like the ID 5100? The answer, Jerry, is no. Nope. Because hams didn't have fingers when that radio came out. Evolution hadn't gotten that far.
So the D700 and the 710 after it, it is okay, I'm just going to have to disconnect it. On the mode you're in, but it's not like a big complex menu system like the Yaesu 8 Blah X series is. Man, that really isn't long enough.
Fuzzy. They're fuzzy is what you mean. They're fuzzy buttons. They're not fuzzy.
Yeah. But to me, this is kind of the best compromise between not having a bajillion buttons on the front panel, but still having all the functions that you need where and when you need them. So like this is the function button here. If I push that button, then all of the other buttons change their function. So I'm one button push away from changing what all of these buttons do. And then if you push and hold it, you get another set of function buttons over here. I'm doing this from memory here.
You're doing fine.
You're doing just great. You're explaining.
It's like, it's like the replacement version to the 741.
I'm not familiar with the 741, but that sounds right. Somebody else mentioned that.
Yeah, it was then replaced by the 710 after this one. Yeah. I got to tell you, by the way, in my humble opinion, for VHF radios, I really think Kenwood by far always had the best, most intuitive user interface.
The D700 is, and the D710 after it. I just don't own any D710s because I bought all mine when the 700 was current. It is, in my opinion, the most usable UI of any VHF UHF mobile rig I have ever used. Period. Full stop. And I love them. I recommend them to anybody and everybody. I still own 4 D700s, although only 3 displays. Don't ask. Great radio. I had one on my motorcycle, one in my car, one on my desk here, and then I just inherited my dad's D700 when he passed away back in November, and I installed it out in my shed. My office where I do my work stuff, my day job stuff. So I now have 4 of these radios and I love them.
All right. So another great question from Dave 86A, which is an easy call sign to say. What's the difference between a vertical wire with a tuner at the bottom of it and a screwdriver antenna? Discuss.
Go.
Let's start with the fundamental differences where you put the inductance. With the tuner at the bottom of the antenna, you're feeding at the coil, and then you have a radiating whip. With the screwdriver antenna, the coil is in the middle. So that's mechanically the starting point of the difference. Generally speaking, it's mechanically more convenient to put the inductor at the bottom because it's big and heavy, but electrically, you tend to get a little bit better performance if you can move the coil up into the body of the antenna, not at the base. Tends to be more efficient.
But I've seen screwdrivers where the coil is down literally at the physical base of the antenna. Is there really some part of radiating element between the feed point?
Well, it's even if you look at, let's take a common commercial one like a Tar Heel antenna. So
Do I need to go get one so we can show
would
it
you
off?
go get? Yes, would you get one, Mike?
I'll be right back.
Thank you. So even if you go with a small one, to really make the point that you're getting to, Mark, the Tar Heel Baby, I think is what they call it. It's got like a 1 foot or 1.5 feet or so bottom section before the coil, and then there's about a 5-6 foot whip. So yeah, I mean there's some mounting mechanism that doesn't move before the coil.
Okay, so I wasn't aware of that.
Yes, I mean, but quite frankly, if you're like on 40 meters, the whole thing is such a tiny fraction of a wavelength that it sort of doesn't really matter.
An antenna-uator.
It's an antenna. Exactly. And 40 it is. Yeah. But hey, if that's what you can put on your car, because you're not going to put a 30-foot antenna in your car, then that's what you put in your car, if you want to do that.
So I have ham sticks. So when I drive in my Prius, I've got an antenna mount on the back of the car that I can either put a VHF UHF dual band on while I'm driving, or when I park and want to operate HF, I can take that antenna off and stick a ham stick on there with the 3/8 20 stud mount. And the ham sticks are 4-foot fiberglass sections with the wire wrapped around it, and that's your base load inductance. And then like a 4-foot whip on top of that. So the entire antenna is like 8 feet long on top of a Prius, and it just looks comical. It looks like a clown car. It looks like if I were to try and drive with the thing on it, like the car would just flip backwards because I got a giant sail. Anyway.
So go ahead, Rod. The coiling part is here though. So it's middle.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
This is the antenna, and then it's from the rod here through to the what do you call them? The little
collar
thingies. The collar. Then you can't see it here, but there's all these coils right here. So that's that's your loading. It's your coil. And if we went to 80, of course, it would go way up. I have to admit, I bought one day at Dayton because I just had to try it out, and I also had the big screwdriver, and I tell you, this thing works. It really does. They've done an amazing job with it. And I have quick disconnect on it. And I only put it on the car when I drive to Dayton. So I haven't been to Dayton in a while. But
I use my little Tar Heel for a field day antenna before, where they sell a mounting plate for their antennas that have a bunch of lug holes on the outside. So I made 48, I think they were quarter wave on 40 meter radials. Strung them out in a radial field.
Would rock.
Huh?
I said that would rock. I'm sure it was amazing.
It wasn't. Well, and then the funny thing was, for the radiating or for the actual antenna, MFJ sells a chromed collapsible whip that I can't remember if it's 17 feet or 21 feet long. But I put that on.
16, it's 16 or 17 feet. It's like 20 meter. It's about a quarter wave on 20.
Yep. So I stuck one of those on there, and that was our vertical for field day. But again, it didn't really perform as well as the dipoles did that day, which, I mean, I'm sure most people at field day are mostly dipolish, but it was a fun experiment. Really, if I wanted to do it right, the ground radial should have been half wave.
When you get right down to it, no amount of money can make up for a full-size antenna. So it at the end of the day, it's all physics. It is, if you have a half-wave wire dipole antenna, it's going to work better as a full-size antenna than a mechanically squished antenna with a ton of inductance in it to make it appear to be 50 ohms to the transmitter.
I respectfully disagree with your comment about no amount of money makes up for a bad antenna.
Please continue.
Finding somebody who has land that you can buy a flex radio and have them install it there can make up for you having a terrible antenna situation at your QTH.
Fair enough. I accept your counter.
The good news is, if you have to get on from an apartment balcony and that's all you've got, thank you to Joe Taylor and FT8, and you can be successful and make contacts. And if you're having fun doing that, awesome.
Doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't matter.
And if you're going HF mobile, it's not like you can put up a full-size dipole. It's
all about compromises.
Right. It's no radio, or the best you can get away with. If you look at like the small Tar Heel, which is a very nice antenna, and about 6 feet overall length, 7 feet, something like 6 feet. If you compare that to like some of these other, there you go. Some of the other really good quality screwdriver antennas. There was a company here in California called High Sierra that used to make big screwdriver antennas.
Too.
I'm not surprised.
You want me to go get it too?
No, it wouldn't fit in the frame of the camera.
So but that's what I was comparing this to.
Oh, and this is better than the High Sierra?
No, comparable.
Oh, okay. Well, so if you're like really serious about mobile whips, then you want to make the antenna as tall as you can get away with. So, and by as tall as you can get away with, I mean, there's a point where you can't legally have it too high because you'll scrape the overpass or whatever. But truly, the bigger the better, especially if you think you're going to be on 40 meters or 80 meters, because when you're on 80 meters, a quarter wave is 66 feet, and you squish it down to 6 feet, you're at 1/10 of the size it wants to be, and obviously your efficiency is going to
approaching nothing. That is one of my favorite.
And I was going to award you 10 points for the casual use of the word asymptotic.
Learn a word every day. Use it in every way.
Search that up in Google definition. Ask, how do you spell that? Because
So for Yaesu owners, we're seeing a lot of love for the AT.
I had one of those.
The ATAS
120. Largely because it's all managed within the radio. There's no complex controller. It's wonderful, and this is spouse approved.
Yeah,
So
it is aesthetically more pleasing than a Tar Heel. It's smaller. In my opinion, it doesn't perform as well as the Tar Heel.
Oh, great.
But the integration with the radio is really a plus. I mean, I used to have one on my Pathfinder, so I had it mounted on the tire rack, and it worked great. It electrically worked, but it didn't perform worth snot. So there is that. But
there is something to be said.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say there is something to be said about the ATAS, and we love to hate on them because they might be kind of a moderate performer. It's the ATAS 120 Alpha that I'm talking about, and I went through a lengthy period of time with my last vehicle, a VW Jetta, diesel Jetta, so no noise floor. It was awesome, mobile, and a friend of mine helped me do an awful lot of capacitive coupling and bonding straps from the trunk lid down to the rest of the vehicle. We did that, and we lengthened the whip. So the stock whip on these things is 32 inches long. My whip's 60. I had to remachine out the top. I did that by hand with a hand drill, and I retapped the set screws because there wasn't much left by the time I drilled out the top. And when I did those two things, I worked 6 continents in 4 months, driving around parts of southern Ontario. Today, that antenna is still with me. It's on the front fender of my F350. It's a great little antenna. And just in these northern climates with salt on the road, you just want to take care of it and do annual maintenance on it for sure.
The ATAS was not Southern Ontario salt friendly. We burned out a couple of them. But the good thing, on any of these mobile whips, you can add a capacitance hat. And that you can buy them. They have 3/8 threads. You just insert it between the top of the main part and put the whip on top of it. And they're really worth the investment. High Sierra used to sell them.
Yep.
And I got another one of those in the garage.
So does Tar Heel sells one as well.
Yeah. That's right. They do too. Yeah.
And as mentioned, and I'll repeat it for here, if you live in a salt environment, annually you have to clean this. Have to. Or you will blow it up.
Or you go to Burning Man. So Burning Man, they have what's called the playa, the giant salt lake bed, dry lake bed out in Nevada desert called Black Rock Desert. They, my burner friends, they don't use this word, but it is the ultimate mess your stuff up material. It is conductive, corrosive, abrasive, and pervasive.
All at
like
once.
All 4 of those things at once, and it will your stuff up if you are not careful about it and clean up your stuff.
That.
Yeah,
in Ontario, this time of year, we put lots of salt out. Why? Because we're dumping our storage bins full of salt everywhere. Ask me how.
And what's the juice we're using?
Oh, the saline, not saline.
Pickle juice.
Juice, basically.
Beet juice. Beet juice.
Beet juice, yeah.
Beet juice. Yep. On that happy note.
So going back to the questions, David Ellis, KC7WEZ asks, what is a thin and strong wire to use to increase the height of my Gray Line Performance 24-foot flagpole antenna? I need to be stealthy. My HOA won't allow antennas, but gave me permission for my flagpole. Hi.
I'm not sure where he wants to put the wire. How does the wire work with the flagpole?
You know, I have a friend who has a 27 foot, I want to say 0.5 vertical, and he landed up adding, I want to say 16 feet. What's the difference between that and 43? Yeah, 16 feet. And he bonded it to the top, and then he tied that 16 foot off onto a tree. And it wasn't perfectly vertical, but it got extra radiator as a direct result
of the antenna.
Yep, attach it to the top of the antenna. So, he says it works great.
So for a recommendation of a brand of wire, personally, I buy all of my wire from the Wireman. And if you want something really tiny and stealthy, it's what we use on the Pactennas. So it's this stuff here, and it's 26 gauge. It's got a steel core and a copper coating around it, and then obviously a covering. And it doesn't kink up very easily, which is really nice. So it's not cheap, but it's a very good quality wire, and it has about a 25-pound strength. So I would look at that stuff. Another source is Davis RF. They make something very similar to that.
FlexWeave.
Oh, is that what it's called?
FlexWeave is great stuff. I love it. You can tie a knot in it. It's so supple.
Mm.
When did Vince's camera look like he came off the Apollo 11 moonshot?
I don't see that.
Yeah, you're grainy, but that's okay. I do want to go back to where I'm pretty sure I've never heard in my amateur career, which granted, I'm a young ham. I've only been one for 12 years. Never heard anybody refer to antenna materials as supple.
Oh, this calls for the demo, doesn't it? And doesn't video just, doesn't it just, you just had
That's why Vince is on a cordless headset.
Yeah, I think it's asymptotically approaching supple.
Yes, it is. And so here's some 14 gauge Davis FlexWeave with the nice clear coating on it. And here's what I love about it. Imagine, I don't have an egg insulator, but just imagine if I did have an egg insulator in there. And I can tie a knot in that, and that egg insulator's not going to go anywhere. Oh, did I tie the knot in the wrong place? Yeah, no problem. We'll just back it out again. This stuff is amazing. Davis RF FlexWeave, except no substitutes.
So Vince, is that stuff is that a high thread count? What do you?
Yes, it's Egyptian cotton, George.
Yes, it's 600 thread, George.
You can sleep on that.
That's what I was trying to. I don't know, what do you call it?
Where do you get it, Vince?
You get it from Davis RF. You can buy it from major retailers, HRO in the States, Radio World in Canada. They all stock various types of it. It's, I want to say, 37 strand or 600 thread count if you wish.
In a row?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, indeed.
There are some people in the audience who are laughing hysterically and possibly just spit out their drink, right?
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Dave.
Is there a term for this high, of very fine wire? Not supple.
It's strand count, but there's a strand density measurement that I can't remember what it's called.
Normally this wire is
Flaccid.
7 strand or 15 strand is typical what we get with household electrical wire or even zip wire that we do our 12 volt stuff with. This stuff is 3 times that. So the threads on the inside to keep the joke running a bit longer are really super fine, and they'll poke a hole in your finger so much easier than that thick stuff, I might add too.
So I have some DC wire that is many very fine strands, and I find that it just snaps super easily. Do you have that problem with that? Is it pure copper, or is it like copper clad steel strands?
It is pure copper. And do I have that problem with it snapping? No, I do not. And I have 2 fan dipoles made of this stuff, my camping dipole.
Rope.
Supple antenna rope.
I'm envisioning lotion being applied to this as you store it. Okay.
You know, what's the
Thankfully, I think
expression from
there's-
that song? So round, so firm, so fully packed. That's my wire.
And as the evening wears on the
Moving
East
on.
Coast-
Sure, I've heard that song, but okay.
Moving on, please.
Maybe it's a generational thing. All right. Someone mentioned Pac-10 may have other than dipole antennas available soon. George, do you know who we would call who might have some insight into what Pac-10 is going to have soon?
Is this shameless plug time number 4?
Well, no, it's an answer.
No,
to
I
your
just want to
question.
know when I can order my damn antenna.
Yeah.
It's from Robert KB7NG.
Oh, well, in that case, Robert, the answer is hopefully in a couple of weeks. There's an enormous pile of parts and incredibly long spools of wire in Oak Grove, Illinois, right at the moment where they're being assembled. So we use a contract manufacturer in Illinois to do all of our antenna assembly. And they just shipped a whole bunch of chokes and link dipole wire elements to us, and we're filling all that stuff now. And the random wire NFEDs and the NFED half waves are all being assembled now. We should be getting them in a couple weeks.
George,
I
are
keep
you
waiting to upgrade this.
Oh my God, that's like that's
Wow.
that's like the earliest version. Oh my God, that looks.
That's
like
why you
Extra
sent it to
item.
me.
I've got
That's
mine,
why I
one of those too.
sloughed it off on you. The new ones are a little bit smaller.
So, George,
And-
are you going to be upgrading to the NFED halfway supple edition?
We might consider that. I'll have to consult with Vince and see if he'll do some supple consulting for us.
Good.
We'll see if we can supply fit.
You'd be our supplicant.
All right, going back to the chat to see if there are any other questions. Folks, if you do have questions at the top
That
of
was
the
painful
chat
to
window,
say.
there's a Q&A section that you can go and post in, and that's where we're primarily pulling questions from now. Also, I haven't said this, we're very grateful for you to be here. The audience that we've had tonight actually far exceeded my expectations. We thought we'd get 6, maybe 7, and
They were pretty low.
we're the first 6, right? So thank you guys for hanging out with us. Oh, a new question. Oh, Mark, you're saying it was you? You're the draw?
I like Matt's comment. He said, or Bill rather, he said that his K3, the knob on his K3 is very supple. Good to know.
So
I would describe the K1 VFO knob the same way.
Jerry
Jurens.
N2JG, who I've already offended, and he has taken
Hey,
offense,
I know Greg.
or
They're
GJ.
related. I checked.
So
Like-
he asks, any idea where I can get a MAT 705 plus before I die? You know what's funny?
I have an
I
alternate.
called George and told him about it because I went on DXpeditions. That's not the right word. DX Engineering. Sorry, I went on DX Engineering's website back around the holidays, and they didn't have it listed anymore. So I called them, and the guy I spoke with basically said, "Yeah, that's weird. We don't list them anymore." And then he's like, "Oh, well, we have a new one called a 705. We just haven't put it online yet. So, or the 705 plus." So I got one before that they were publicly available. I mean, you just got to keep calling. I don't know. I haven't seen any. Of course, I'm not looking for one. Anybody else have any ideas where one
Well,
might find it?
I just looked at DX Engineering's website because that's where I bought mine, and it says estimated ship date March 15 this year.
That's Monday.
Yeah,
Monday.
so I would
Now,
say go to DX Engineering and check it out.
Well, but in
I
all
reflect-
fairness, Jerry may have some pretty extreme plans on Sunday, so maybe he's trying to get a hold of one
Well,
tomorrow.
fair enough.
I looked at that one, and I talked to George about this. I think we talked about this in the show. I went with the ATU 100, which is a well-published kit in free domain, and you can actually buy them. Actually, you can buy it at Walmart, believe it or not, and even Walmart Canada. And it goes to 100 watts. It's the one I got. It's like this. There's many different versions of it, and I was able to make it work on my 705. There's published documentation, and you do have to flash the EEPROM to do that. But it was incredibly inexpensive. It was $70 US shipped. So
That's
it's
a
another
deal.
alternate if you can't find a 705. And certainly since the LDG we all love too, like the Z100, et cetera. Are all
Does
great
that have
choices.
built-in battery or is that power external?
Yeah. Yeah, little USB, another micro USB connector to break right here.
You know, a lot of these there's so many of these ham radio products coming out of China. It's kind of a blizzard of these things, and they're kind of a crapshoot because sometimes they turn out to be really cool products, and sometimes they're just kind of like, not quite right. But I'm just amazed with how many radio products. One of the comments I saw earlier on, a fellow mentioned that he uses a MIC HF, which originally was designed by a guy, I think, in the UK. Mark, you know about those things. Don't you have one of those?
M0NKA.
Yeah. I have some boards from a very early version of it. Actually, turns out it wasn't all that much earlier than what's out now. I never got mine fully assembled when I was putting the 128-pin microcontroller, and I'm not kidding, on the board with a super tiny pin pitch. I ended up lifting a trace, and I just haven't bothered to go in and try and bodge the thing back together. But yeah, they are. It's a kind of a DIY, but fully designed out and buildable. It's entirely SDR with a big, super powerful microcontroller that's doing all of the DSP stuff. So it's not like an application processor. It's still a microcontroller, but it's got the DSP on there, and it's sampling. I think it's sampling at a high audio rate. So it's not flex, 60 megabit per second or 60 megasamples kind of sampling rate, but it is, I think it's 48 kilohertz or maybe 192, something around there, and it's doing all of the mod and demod in software. Nick Karchukis, Exploding Lemur, is actually the one who got me into that.
I thought it was you, but it must be Nick. I knew somebody built one.
Yes, he has. In fact, I think he's built 2 at this point.
Those look like very nice radios.
Yeah, they do. I mean, it's roughly on par hand wavy with a 705, right? Like the spec wise, it's very similar to a 705. It's HF. It might also include 6 meters. I don't think it'll do 2 or 440, 2 meter or 440, but all the modes, it's software. It's got the, roughly 3 or 4 inch or 4 inch, 5 inch display, touch screen, waterfall, all the modes. In fact, it technically it's more capable than a 705 because being open source, obviously, Codec 2 and FreeDV have been ported to it and all of that kind of stuff. So it looks like a really slick radio, and I would love to get one. But
while you have the mic, we've had a request. Can you please list the source of the toroid numbers again?
Oh, sure. Source. The toroids are a whole thing. I get mine from toroids.info. So go to toroids.info, and it gives you all kinds of super useful information. There's also a calculator on there. Each one of the different types of toroids, their sizes and mixes are the 2 different numbers. The mix is the material, the type of material that's in here, and it has different RF properties and magnetic properties. And then that's the second number of the toroid. The first number is the size, physical size. It's just the outer diameter in tenths of an inch. So this is an FT, which means ferrite toroid, 140, which means 1.4 inches outer diameter, dash 43. And the dash 43 is the mix, the material, the type of material that's on here. If you're going to be doing things in HF, if you're primarily interested in the lower end of HF, get a type 31. FT, then the number, the size, the outer diameter, dash the mix type. There are also T number dash number. Physically, they're very similar. The type of material is different. I don't remember the exact differences between an FT and a T, but it's kind of a different category of material, but it's still the same numbering. T and then a number is the outside diameter, and then dash the mix. In the T-type toroids, it's type 6 and type 2 are the 2 that are common for HF, similar to 43 and 31, but it's the other half. Did that answer the question?
Yes. The other part of the question was, can you use one of each toroid on the same cable?
Yeah.
Sure.
And then
what you would do is you would wrap it around one, and then serially wrap it around the other one. So you would have two different wrappings around the toroids, and the first one would be the mix 43, the second one would be the mix 31, or whichever order. And that's just like putting two inductors in series. And it gets the job done, and it will work on, it'll cover the whole frequency much better.
And then the name of that supple wire that we were talking about was Flex Weave. And Vince, is there a specific place that you buy that? You're muted.
Yeah, I'm muted. Finally, we got that going tonight. I buy mine from Davis RF if I'm not buying it from one of the retailers. So I posted the note with all of the specs from Davis RF in the chat log.
All right. This is a near and dear. Oh, George, go ahead.
I just want to add one thing to what Mark was saying about toroids, because you can never say enough about such a simple thing. So can we go into hour 2 of ferrite talk?
Hey, at least it's not DMR.
No, we did 6 hours in DMR. We can do 3 hours in ferrites. So one of the resources that I found also super useful, there's a fellow who sadly passed away a few years back, and his name was Steve, G3TXQ. And his website had a bunch of really, really useful project information. That website went away. But through the miracle of the Wayback Machine, you can go back and get his website. So he put together a table that shows the frequency response for these different materials with different numbers of turns of common coax cable. So if you took, for example, RG58, and you did 8 turns or 12 turns or 16 turns on a type 43 core, it would have this frequency response of, where the maximum impedance would be for that over the HF range. So when we talk about in loose terms, type 31 and 43, and they're about the same, they're a little bit different. Well, if you look at the chart he has on his website, you can really see what the frequency overlap is and where the sweet spot is, and you could use this as a way to judge for yourself. It also gives you a clue of how many turns you should put through there. And it's not binary. It's not like 6 will work and 7 won't. It's more like, well, the more turns, the more you're going to increase the impedance, but also you're going to shift the frequency sweet spot for that core. So anyway, take a look at the link that I put there in the chat if you want to check it out. Mark,
one caveat on that article. I read a bunch of those articles. His writings were very, this is the right way to do it, and anyone else is stupid for thinking otherwise. And I really did not like that tone of his article. The reality is there's a lot of things that'll work. Some may work better than others, but a lot of it's going to be more driven by cost or practicality or whatever. And his article was very much written, this is the way to do it, period, full stop. And I just disagree with that particular aspect of it. Having said that, the information that he presented was technically correct. Like, this is the most optimal way of doing things, but that doesn't mean that it's the only way of doing things. And sometimes a compromise will.
I never got that from his article. I found it very technically objective. I don't know if maybe we're talking about two different things, because I didn't get that from this guy's article at all.
We all know that hams would never state opinions as fact.
That's absolutely not true, Jeremy.
I disagree with somebody else's opinion. No, that's
So here's what we're gonna do is we're coming up on the top of the third hour, or the bottom of the third hour. I've never got that right. Probably the bottom of the third hour. We're coming up at midnight for us East Coasters. There are 2 questions left in the chat. We're going to answer those relatively quickly, and then we're going to start preparing to sign off. I'm going to leave the funnest one for last. George, in 3 words or less, of the Pactena models, 2 questions. Well, okay, you can't do it in 3 words or less. Which is better, the end-fed half-wave or the random wire? And then what is the power rating of your antennas? Okay,
in reverse order, the power rating is 100 watts. Which is the best antenna? Let me use a golfing analogy. It's like saying, which is the best golf club? I mean, it really is.
Which is the best radio?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not trying to be too glib about it. The reason I say that it's that kind of a question is because each of the antennas is really good for something and not as good as for something else. If you don't want to use a tuner, you need a resonant antenna, so end-fed half-wave or dipole. If you want a horizontally polarized antenna, inverted V dipole to get rid of noise. If you want the smallest footprint, easiest to set up, end-fed half-wave with a tuner, random wire antenna. So, I mean, each one is really ideal for a particular use case, which is why we make all of them. I mean, it's if there was one, like if I had a 7-iron, I could, that baby could be a driver and a putter. It's kind of lousy at both, but it's pretty good in the middle. It's the same thing with antennas. Any one of these will work perfectly fine, but there's some trade-offs, and some are just mechanically a little bit more convenient depending on your circumstances. For me personally, I kind of go in a circle. I kind of pick one and then I use the other one and like it. I really like an inverted V antenna because they're in the city, because they're less noisy. They're not vertical. I don't need a tuner. They're very broadband. But if I'm hiking or I want quick setup, like I want to go to the park and set up in 5 minutes, then I'll use a end-fed random wire antenna, because I could be on any band, instantly change around without touching the antenna. So it just depends on what you're trying to optimize for.
Jeremy, can I get one in?
Of course. You haven't spoken in a while.
I just spotted this in the chat and I really loved it. On amplifiers, this is from Charles. On amplifiers, solid state or tube? Advantages.
Oh, that's
this is easy.
Okay, hour 6.
Yeah.
This is super easy. If you're somebody who enjoys the nonlinear distortion of fine audio signals, by all means, go. Wait, are we talking about RF amplifiers? Or?
Yes, RF.
Oh, well, when Mark and I start the Audiophile Workbench as our new podcast.
I'm in.
Going to take a while.
You son of a bitch! Yeah. I'm in.
We're just going to challenge. We're going to take that as a topic, I think, for a future show. Is that fair, or should we try to?
That's a good question, though.
It's a great question. That's why I called it out.
Okay, so in fairness, since he asked the question, he deserves at least an answer. So I would say if anybody thank you. If anybody has an opinion, you get like 3 sentences to vent your opinion. Does anybody want to vent your opinion, Mike?
LMDOS for ease, rapid band changing, and everything. Most people will want to stick a tuner on it. Classic tubed with a tuned front end where you manually got to tune it. You can pretty much live without a tuner, and it's not cleaner. And as somebody who sells amplifiers, the tube ones are a bit cleaner.
Not only are they a bit cleaner, but they're nearly indestructible. You will, like, if your antenna is out of tune and you start reflecting a bunch of power back to your tubes, you're not going to blow them up nearly as easily as you will a solid state.
Now, most solid state work, by the way. What are you talking about tubes about?
I think,
but they are a pain. They are finicky. They are finicky. You have to sit there and twiddle the knobs and tune them and all that stuff. And it is a more hands-on, tactile experience. It's advantages and disadvantages to each.
And I think it would be fair to say that if you're fairly new to amplifiers, it might be a safer choice to go with solid state and a tuner.
You're right, because I can't carry the Henry 3K Classic anywhere.
You might hurt yourself, yes.
Or remote it.
I'm challenging that because it was on wheels. It had wheels.
For both the power supply and the unit, yes.
Yeah. That's why you go with the 6K, though, so it's all one nice integrated cabinet. Okay, that was
just so you know, guys from the office are watching. Okay,
yeah,
I'm getting called.
That's fine. Stuff. They well, actually, then this is a nice softball that we've got here to end our evening. Dave Fifield, I'm sorry if it is Fifield. I'm just mispronouncing. I like your call sign though, AD6A. So Dave asks, when do you know you have enough radios? Rod, I'm gonna go to you first.
I'm gonna go to Rod on that one.
Is that a serious question?
It's
what kind of a ham are you?
You have to open up a spreadsheet because this is not something that's done with mild analysis.
No.
And your wife can't tell the difference.
You will need on one side of the columns double column accounting, right? You
Albert's
will
got
need
it.
on one side of the column the cost of what you want to procure in about the next 10 years. And on the other side of the column, how much a divorce lawyer is going to cost you.
I have a question for Rod. How do you prevent your wife from selling the equipment for what you told her you bought it for when you die?
You can't. It's too bad. You lose.
That's
You-
that's
Yeah,
not
just
true at
honesty is
all.
the best policy.
When you are dead, that's when you actually like make sure that a close friend gives your significant other the box of receipts so that they can try to
real
get close to
box.
market value. Yeah, the real
The
box.
real box.
Just answer to this, by the way. Having hung out with a club of some rather sometimes older gentlemen,
Oh, friends of ours?
friends of ours,
Yes.
you actually have a binder that you keep somewhere that your friends
do
know
that.
where it is. And it lists all the market value of this stuff because the spouses are usually, not always, but usually poorly equipped to deal with this stuff. And you want to make sure that's why you belong to a club. Okay. So that when you're gone, I turned this into a serious answer. When you're gone,
Like Steve.
something will
Yeah.
work its way out.
But
Steve
the
nailed it here.
well, so Steve's answer was just make sure your wife has more expensive hobbies than you do. My wife is a knitter, so I've got that one covered. You would be surprised at the cost of fiber. Good fibers anyway. So the real answer to this question is, of course, one more than you have now. And that is always
It's
the
always
answer.
N plus
You know,
one.
N plus one.
I want to take a crack at this with a legitimate answer. Because with my newfound music hobby, and I'm literally sitting in a room surrounded by tons of synthesizers, I get the same question about that. But with radios, here's what I've learned. Number one, I'm a gadget person. You have to start by understanding what kind of individual are you. If you're somebody who's just looking to make communication, the answer is one or two. I mean, because there's the base capabilities. I probably want VHF, UHF. I might want some HF capabilities. I might want a handy talkie versus a mobile, right? Like you have to understand those core use cases. But the problem is that when you double click on any of those, there's 400 options. But as somebody who's a gadget guy and was blessed with a decent amount of disposable income to be able to put towards this hobby, there was a point in the last generation of radios. So think the 857s, the 706s and 7000s. I pretty much owned every VHF, UHF radio that the big three made, every non-console HF radio that they made. And part of it was I really enjoyed getting around the different interfaces. But it took me a while to learn that from the big three, I just prefer, like ICOM's design philosophy just clicks with me more than Yaesu or Kenwood for HF. I still love a Kenwood VHF, UHF radio. And now that we're moving into the next generation of radios, especially with our software-defined radio technologies, etc., I would prefer a Flex. The long and short of it is the hardest part about this hobby is it's not cheap to acquire current generation equipment, and it really does take some hands-on time to understand what you really want. And this is like, if anybody of you know fishermen own a million different poles, and then the older they get tend to be the fewer they have because they learn what is it that I really like in a thing. The best thing you can do, because not everybody can own every radio, and actually, quite frankly, my wife likes to point out, you can't talk on more than one at a time, which obviously she doesn't know about single radio
SO2R.
SO2R, yeah.
Ask Mark.
But the point that I'm trying to make is that the more time that you
Digital.
can spend exposing or getting exposed, like through friends, club members, etc., that have these things, spend time using other people's equipment so you can figure out what it is you actually like about the experience. If you're just a gadget person, want to collect radios, N+1. If you just want to have the full spectrum of capability, it's probably like 2 to 4.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know.
No, go ahead, Mike.
No, but not one.
This is like,
But, I mean, I was going to say, don't, like the FT897, 87, the X series were a great set of radios because they did DC to, brown light or something, the UHF, which wasn't bad. but they're a Swiss Army knife. And I get this even today. You want a VHF, UHF radio. If you're just an FM person, don't do, you'll find the transverter world's really not what it was designed to do. And so good HF radio, good upper band radio, George.
I think it really is, I guess, to your point and Jeremy's point too, it really is a personal thing. Kind of depends on what you're after. Some people like hoarding stuff, and other people like to just so my personal thing is I'm my wife would be shocked for me to say this. I'm not. Oh well, Mark, you're a case unto yourself. So,
oh my God, Mark.
Yeah.
Is that a djembe on the floor?
Yes.
Is there a theremin in there?
No, I've got the theremin.
Do you really?
I do. Of course I have a theremin. I have a Moog theremin, if you really must know. Shocking, isn't it? So, or maybe not. So for me personally, I don't feel the need to have as much crap as Mark does. In fact, I find it highly irritating. However,
never visit my house.
Yeah. Well, this way death can't find you. That's the plus side. So the thing that I like is I like to try different radios out. So I'll buy a radio and I'll play around with it, and then I'll stop using it, and a year or two later I'll sell it and get something else, because I just like trying different radios. But over time, there's certain radios that I just really, really like and don't want to get rid of, and so I do accumulate a few more than I need. But that's because there's something special about them. Like I've got a KX2 and a KX3. I hardly ever use them, but they're great radios. I really love them. They're really good radios. But I've had a lot of other radios that have come and gone, and they're like, yeah, they're fun for a while. They're novel. It's fun for something different. And then I'm kind of bored and want to try something different. So it sort of depends on what you're after. I think like for HF, for instance, I think everybody should have a home radio that stays home and doesn't get unscrewed from the desk. It's like always there, always working. I think everybody should have a backup HF radio that's fairly portable, that you could either use to flip out your normal HF radio at home with the temporary one in case your main radio poops out, or if you want to go to field day, you've got a nice 100-watt radio. And then if you're also really into super portable stuff like SOTA, then a third like QRP, whatever, tiny radio. So I would say, like normally, like 2 or 3 HF radios, and then mobile VHF, UHF in the car, and one on your desk at home, and about 100 handy talkies. You'd be fine.
So for this session, I would like to point something out in the chat room. I would like to award Alvin Norris the BS award for my wife is upset with me because I don't have the radio that's #1 in Rob Sherwood's list. Dude,
wow.
Knocked it out of the park on that one.
Wow. Yeah.
Anyways.
Points for style.
Points for style, absolutely. Okay, cool. Well, did we beat that one to death?
Well, no, because the philosophy of look,
There's more death that can be beaten out of this question.
I have helped clean out my fair share of silent key shacks, and if there's one universal truth I have learned about hams, it's that hoarding is in our nature. So this could be continued. This could be an entire series of episodes. But what I will say, first of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming and hanging out tonight. As we can tell, the hour has drawn on. We've lost a little under a third of you. But we want to, we have no idea if you guys are just hanging out or if you're regular listeners. For those of you who are not regular listeners, please, again, check us out at www.hamradioworkbench.com. We're available on all of the popular audio podcasting platforms. For those of you who are regular listeners, whether you've just started last episode or you've been with us since episode 1, we want to thank you. It was really hard for us last year with not being able to have Dayton, because our favorite thing about Dayton, the reason that we get a booth, is actually to spend time with you. In the past we've had some of our kits and whatnot, but it's so re-energizing for the effort that we put into this to actually have that touch point with the community. And we miss the stories of, I picked up my first soldering iron because of you. I even picked it up on the correct end because of you. But people have we've had some people tell us that they just stumbled upon our podcast. They weren't hams. They listened to us and they ended up getting their license. We love what you share with us, what you're building and making, and the projects that you're supporting. Oh,
yes,
Mike
it's 5 stitches
from a soldering iron burn.
No, something sharp at my workbench.
Oh,
might have been scraping something.
But yeah, we really appreciate the amount of time, which, I mean, quite frankly, especially with those of you landowners out there or those who have snowplow businesses, you spend a lot of your time with us, and we are just deeply grateful for that. And I want to also thank our hosts who have spent their evening with us tonight. And as our family continues to grow on the workbench, it's nice to see additional faces, additional perspectives, and to have a Canadian perspective. I did want to point out, just in case anybody was wondering what I was drinking earlier. I'm although I have to admit I actually prefer Schweppes, but that's kind of hard to find. Canada Dry was my number one ginger ale growing up, and I am a big ginger ale fan.
Cock and bull, man, cock and bull.
Is that a ginger ale?
Ginger beer. It is the real stuff. Find it and drink some. Thank me later.
Okay.
Canadian Club?
Eh. Oh, Canadian Club. Yeah. More of a Seagram's person. Anyway.
Oh, okay.
But just thank you all very much. So as far as what's going to happen the rest of the weekend, there's going to be some amount of presence somewhere. I think we still have some technical challenges to figure out where and when we need to be with the quote unquote virtual booth. But we're going to make an attempt to be around. And then again, don't worry if you missed anything tonight. And it was just a smorgasbord of random things. We said words like asymptotic. We called speaker or antenna wire supple.
Round, firm, and fully packed. Don't forget that
and with
part.
Good presence.
And
don't forget
presence.
Good presence.
Good presence on the mics, yeah.
So it was a little bit of everything tonight. But that's going to be it for us live from the 2021 QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo. I am your co-host, Jeremy KF7IJZ, joined with my other co-host, George Zafiropoulos, KJ6VU. Find out everything else about the show by visiting us online at www.hamradioworkbench.com. You can find us on Twitter by following @HamWorkbench. You can join our Facebook community by searching for the Ham Radio Workbench podcast group. The Baynet Bay Area Brandmeister DMR Talk Group 31075 is where a lot of our listeners like to hang out. Also, some just fantastic and smart people in the Baynet club. But I'll just real quickly go around the table and ask everybody to say their own version of goodbye. Rod, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you once again for having me. This has been a blast. It always is. Have a great evening, guys, and I will see you tomorrow during the sessions.
Awesome. Vince?
Hey, thanks for having me. Pop by, find me on Twitter @V6LK, website v6lk.com. We're doing booth duty all weekend long here at Ham Radio Expo.
All right, Smitty.
Hi, I'm Smitty Halibut. Thanks for coming. What everybody else said as well. Smitty Halibut on Twitter, SmittyHalibut. I got my new call sign. I am now officially N6MTS, November 6th, Mike Tango Sierra. I will be presenting tomorrow at 3 p.m. Pacific. Sorry, please do your own time zone math. Oh, speaking of time zones, whose idea was it to do it on daylight savings time shift weekend?
Yeah, I caught that this week.
Sunday, how many people are going to be showing up 1 hour off? Anyway, yeah, come find me on Twitter. I also have a YouTube channel, also Smitty Halibut there. I don't post super often, but I do occasionally talk about what kinds of things I'm working on. And if you're working on something because you watched us here, please come to Twitter and tell us about it. I love hearing that. Thank you very much, and be good humans.
Awesome. Mr. Walker.
Well, it's been great. I wanted to quote what John W6TRF said, and this is the advantage of doing this because we've never gotten this before. Great job, guys. My face hurts from laughing. So I guess we've done our job. Thank you, John, for saying that. And I've got 2 talks tomorrow. One on, believe it or not, drones. And that was a stretch for me. Well, and so that was entertaining, actually. So I think you'll find something out. And I finally put together the talk that people have been asking from, where I've got all my stuff and how do I set up the first part of my remote station? What do I need to go buy? And that's the other one. So thanks for joining us.
Just to comment real quickly on that, I saw a comment above, which is actually probably the highest accolade we've ever gotten, George. Somebody called us the click and clack of amateur radio media.
Wow!
I mean,
the problem is that Mike is really the tap it brother with his tap.
Womp womp womp.
I'm going to have to research click and clack. I'm just saying.
I think of us as the Ben and Jerry's of ham radio.
The Ben and Jerry's. Click and clack was a public radio broadcast. A bunch of guys talking about cars. Car talk.
Right on. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then George,
wonderful show.
Take us home.
Oh, thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. We had over 300 people in the live stream, which is amazing. And we really appreciate everybody listening and coming to the event tonight. And we'll see you around in the booth this weekend at various times. Thanks all very much for tuning in.
From all of us here at the Ham Radio Workbench, 7-3, and enjoy the expo.
73.
7-3.
7 3s. Be good humans.